Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kakashi regrets abandoning Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Hatake Kakashi had been in many battles and seen many amazing things in his career as a ninja. He was the son of Konoha's White Fang, a great ninja who had ended in disgrace. He'd studied under Konoha's Yellow Flash, now Konohagakure no Sato's Yandame Hokage. He'd been gifted with a Sharingan eye from his deceased friend and teammate, Uchiha Obito. He had lived through war. He had lived through the attack of a terrible demon. However, in all his wide and varied experience, he had never witnessed anything like this. Crouched at the foot of the memorial statues in the Valley of the End were two of his 3 students. One was distorted almost beyond recognition with gray skin, claws, long gray hair, and freakish wing-like webbed hands sprouting from his shoulder blades. The other was completely covered in demonic crimson chakra that formed a sort of armor in the silhouette of the fox monster he'd last seen 13 years before, his eyes red and slitted, whisker marks wide and black on his cheeks, fangs bared, and claws flexing. The gray one had gathered a fistful of crackling lightning that spewed tainted black sparks. The fox-shrouded one cradled a swirling sphere of raw violet chakra that was edged in a red aura. It was a twisted, terrifying replay of their earlier duel atop the hospital back in the village. That time he'd been able to stop them. But this time, as he raced over the surface of the lake towards the statues and the waterfall, he couldn't stop them. At some signal only they were aware of, they lunged at each other and smashed their attacks together. The light, the noise, and the wind generated by the blast was incredible. It took all of Kakashi's skill and strength to keep from tumbling end over end to the other side of the valley. Poor little Pakken, his favorite summon, was forced to cling to Kakashi's pant leg with his teeth to keep from being swept away by the explosion. Even with Obito's powerful eye, he couldn't see a thing at the eye of the storm. And then it was over. Desperate and dreading what he would find, Kakashi dove through the misty curtain of the ruined waterfall. Uchiha Sasuke was still standing. Uzumaki Naruto was not. Kakashi struck quickly, a sharp blow to the back of the neck, and then Sasuke wasn't standing either. Both lay limply on the stone ground, soaking wet and stripped of their monstrous forms. "Why'd you knock him out?" Pakken asked, poking Sasuke with a tiny paw. "I'm not interested in fighting him all the way home," Kakashi sighed and bound him up tightly with wire. "After that stunt I don't dare trust him." When Sasuke was restrained to his satisfaction, he slung the unconscious boy over his shoulder and moved to inspect the other boy. Naruto looked dead. He lay so still that it was hard to see him breathing. It was downright unnatural to see Naruto be so still. But by some miracle, he was still alive. With a lot of awkward wrestling, Kakashi hefted his orange-clad student over his other shoulder. Wayward students both in hand, Kakashi turned to dismiss his canine helper. "Thanks, Pakken." "No problem." Pakken waved a paw. "See ya." Then he vanished in a puff of smoke. Sighing, Kakashi left the ruined waterfall and the smashed statues of the Valley of the End behind as he started the long run home. Namake's Minato, Yandame Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, sat on top of the ruined water tower on the roof of Konoha's hospital. Below him on the fenced-in roof, lines of white bed sheets fluttered in the warm breezes as they dried. Above him, the sky was nearly cloudless and the sun was shining brightly. And on this wonderful, peaceful day he, Konoha's most powerful ninja, felt absolutely sick. The day before he dispatched his newest Chunin, along with a team of talented genin, to retrieve another genin, the fabled last Uchiha, from defecting to Oto and Orochimaru. He knew that it would be a difficult and dangerous mission for them as they were young and inexperienced, and the Uchiha boy was likely to have escorts. But with all the jounin and experienced Chunin out on missions, the team he'd sent out would have to do. So he sent them off and sent a message to Suna and put the matter off to the side. Then Shizen's team returned from their mission with Genma and Rei beaten within a few inches of their lives. The 2 jounin had encountered 4 Otonin bearing a sealed coffin barrel and had been defeated spectacularly. Speaking with the 2 of them after Tsunade had treated them, Minato had been chilled. Had he but 1 jounin available to send out, he would have. But he could spare no one, and could only sit back and wait for the young ninja to return. And then they'd been brought back, one by one. Akimichi Chuji was first, carried in by one of the medic teams organized and dispatched by Tsunade. The chubby young genin was a bruised, emaciated shadow of his usual self as his body continued to slowly devour itself. The boy had taken all 3 of his clan's secret pills. Tsunade herself was working on him. Hyuga Niji arrived next. The prodigy of the noble clan was also in terrible shape. His back was riddled with puncture wounds and there was a gaping hole in his side. It seemed that Niji's opponent had discovered the Bikugan's tiny blind spot. Shizen, Tsunade's apprentice, was leading his surgery. Sabaku no Kankura dragged Inuzuka Kiba and his Niken partner, Akamaru, and next. Since he'd gotten an assist from the Suna puppeteer, his injuries were not as severe as the first two. But he'd still suffered a deep stomach wound, lost a lot of blood, and his puppy was badly beaten. The last he'd heard, Kiba's sister, Hana, was still treating Akamaru. Nara Shikamura had returned with Sabaku no Temari shortly after Kiba. Aside from a broken finger and a burned forearm, he was fine. That one good piece of news at least reassured Minato that he'd made a good choice in promoting the boy to Chunin. However, seeing the state of his team, his friends, Chuji especially, was hitting the shadow manipulator hard. Barely a half hour ago, he'd been informed that the runaway Rock Lee had been returned to the hospital by Sabaku no Gaara. Minato was a little unnerved by this news, as Gaara had been the one who sent the energetic Lee to the hospital during the Chunin exams. Thankfully, though, the two boys seemed to get along now, and Lee, a few cuts and bruises aside, was no worse for wear. Tsunade would probably keep him in the hospital a while longer than planned as punishment for sneaking off to join the mission without clearance. Now he was left waiting on Kakashi, Sasuke, and Naruto. Damn it, Tsunade-sama! Minato swore, clenching his hands into fists until they hurt. What possessed you to suggest Naruto to the Naro boy? The medical Sannin had been visiting his office when the news of the Uchiha boy's attempt to defect to Orochimaru had come in. She'd lingered near the door when Shikamura had been assigned the mission and followed him out when he left. And she'd gone and recommended Naruto for the retrieval team. When Minato had first learned of Naruto's inclusion on the team from the gate guard's records, he'd been more surprised than anything else. When Tsunade admitted promoting the boy to the Chunin, he'd been irritated. And as the team filtered back to Konoha, broken and bleeding, he'd grown more and more afraid. What shape will Naruto be in when he comes back? Will he be mostly unhurt like Lee and Shikamaru? Will he be hurt like Kiba and Akamaru? Or will he be on death's doorstep like Chuji and Niji? He slumped forward in his perch on the water tower and buried his face in his hands. He really should be in his office wrangling with paperwork. He should be handing out missions to his strained and diminished ninja force to keep the village looking strong and barely affected by the recent Sansound strike. But after Kakashi had turned down an S-ranked mission, which he shouldn't have done as those missions weren't really optional, to retrieve his students, and after Tsunade had deployed her medics, Minato found that he could do nothing but drift around the hospital as he waited. I'm a terrible father, he thought glumly. I've pushed him away, pushed him on others, ignored him in favor of my work, and only now that he might die do I really care. I'm pathetic. In the beginning, his grief over Kushina's death and the monumental amount of work in rebuilding the village, and his ninja force, after the Kyuubi had kept him away from Naruto. When the boy had been small, he'd managed some connection with his son. But as Naruto grew, and more of Kushina manifested in him, Minato found it harder and harder to be around him. The loss of his almost wife was a wound that just refused to heal, and Naruto, who was so much like his mother, was salt to that wound. In response to his absence, Naruto acted up and acted out. He purposely took his love of the color orange too far and wore bright orange pants and a blue and orange jacket, a suicidal outfit for a ninja. He was loud, he was rude, he referred to his father as Hokage Jiji even though he wasn't that old, and he invented a style of henge that generated a naked girl covered only by smoke. He played pranks and was a terrible student in the academy. He did anything for attention from anyone regardless if it was good or bad. Kushina, if you were still here you'd knock my teeth out for how I've been neglecting Naruto. Minato chuckled bitterly and dropped down from the water tower to stand among the fluttering lines of bed sheets. And I would deserve it. Glancing over his shoulder, he had the damage to the small water tower. The metal walls of the cylinder were punched in on one side, and bloomed outward in a ragged flower on the other. Even though it would be a real pain to replace, he couldn't help but smile a little at the sight of it. Naruto did that with my jutsu. Intellectually, he'd known that Naruto was capable of performing the Rasengan, but to see physical proof of it gave him a bittersweet feeling of pride. It had taken him 3 years to develop the jutsu, and Naruto, not yet 13, had found a way to perform it in only a few months. It was an incredible feat for someone so young to master a jutsu so powerful, but for Naruto, a boy who'd flunked the Genin exam 3 times, it was absolutely astonishing. But it should have been me to teach him the Rasengan, he sighed, not Jiraiya-sensei. The Rasengan is my invention, I know it best. Looking away from the damaged water tower, Minato looked up at a wispy cloud that was casting a shadow over the hospital roof and grinned faintly. At least he can't teach Naruto my Hiraishin no jutsu behind my back. Hokage-sama. Minato spun around to find a young medical ninja trainee standing breathlessly at the door to the roof. Hokage-sama, the young girl repeated. Hatake Kakashi has arrived. And he's brought both Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto with him. That was all that Minato needed to hear. With a curt, distracted nod, he brushed past her and strode back into the hospital in search of his former student. He needed to see his son. And he needed to knock the Uchiha boy upside the head. As he strode through the sterile hallways of the hospital, scattering medical staff as he went, he felt himself tensing up. It was hard not to run, hard to keep breathing calmly and evenly. He couldn't remember feeling so tense since the war years. He slowed his pace when he came to one of the operating rooms where Shikamaru's father Shikaku, and Sabaka no Temari sat waiting for news of Chuji's condition. Tsunade was now present and the light over the operating room dark, signaling that treatment of the patient was complete, one way or the other. At first Minato thought it was bad news, as Shikamaru was crying, but Tsunade's kind, calm smile, free of pity, let him know that the young Chunin's tears were of relief, not of grief. Shizen had also recently arrived on the scene. Breathless and sweaty, her triumphant smile was all Minato needed to see. Hyuga Niji would make it too. And then Kakashi intruded on the gathering. His former student had the Uchiha slung over one shoulder, and Naruto over the other. The Jounin looked grim and weary, a look Minato hadn't seen since the darker days of the war. Seeing that look on Kakashi's face made Minato's blood freeze in his veins. Tsunade-sama, Kakashi sighed. Sasuke needs a secure room and as many chakra suppression seals as is safe. Chakra suppression seals? Tsunade repeated with a frown as she waved in a pair of medics to retrieve the Uchiha boy from Kakashi's shoulder. Yes, Kakashi nodded grimly. From what I saw when I caught up with these two, I don't trust him anymore. He also needs the curse seal resealed. He turned his one visible eye towards Minato. You should do the sealing, sensei. My own attempt at sealing doesn't seem to have lasted very long. Minato nodded, barely aware of the handful of shocked glances that he was getting from those who hadn't noticed his arrival. What about Naruto? He asked, amazing himself at how calm and in control he sounded. Physically he should be fine, Kakashi replied, gently shifting the orange-clad boy from his shoulder to his arms. But from how they were fighting. They were fighting? Temari frowned. But I thought they were friends. I thought they were friends too, Kakashi muttered. Peering over Kakashi's shoulder, Minato couldn't help but shiver at the sight of Naruto. The boy was far too still and limp in Kakashi's arms. He was pale and dotted with faint bruises, smudged in dirt and dried blood, and his vibrant orange outfit was torn up. Naruto had never looked smaller and frilier. The sick feelings that had plagued Minato earlier returned full force. Is there something wrong with his eyes, Kakashi? With effort, Minato tore his eyes away from Naruto to watch as Tsunade performed a quick once-over on the Uchiha boy. The dark-haired boy's ankles and wrists were bound tightly with wire, preventing any movement from the unconscious child, especially hand seals. His eyes were bound in bandages, essentially blindfolding him. His Sharingan has reached the 3rd level, Kakashi reported. I don't think he knows how to hypnotize people with them yet, but I'm not about to take that chance. I see, Tsunade nodded gravely. Shizen, send word to ANBU headquarters and request a squad to guard his room. Hi, Shizen bowed and hurried off to fulfill her task. Follow me, Tsunade ordered the pair of medics who supported the Uchiha's unconscious form. I'll be back for Naruto, she added before vanishing down a hall. Kakashi trudged over to a row of chairs propped against the wall and sank into one, carefully arranging Naruto in his lap. Minato was about to join him when Haruno Sakura, the final member of the current Team 7, skidded onto the scene. Wherever she'd been in the village, she'd run all the way to the hospital. Panting for breath, she hurried right up to Kakashi, oblivious to anyone else in the hall. Kakashi-sensei? I brought them both back, he answered. Tsunade-sama is seeing to Sasuke right now. Thank goodness, she sighed in relief and started to leave in search of the Uchiha. Kakashi caught her by the wrist. He's not to have any visitors until further notice. Sakura frowned. But if I were you, Kakashi interrupted, I'd be more worried about the teammate that didn't knock me out and leave me to spend the night on a bench. Her face fell. She looked guiltily at Naruto sprawled on their teacher's lap. How is he? Beat up and exhausted, but I think he'll live, Kakashi replied. Apparently satisfied with this answer, she shifted the topic back to what really seemed to concern her. And what about Sasuke-kun? No major injuries, Kakashi answered shortly. Minato fought down his irritation with the young girl and her blinding infatuation with the renegade Uchiha. She would never be a real kunoichi if she didn't let go of her unhealthy attachment to her dark-haired teammate and focus more on her training. For her sake, he hoped that the girl would open her eyes and see the world beyond Uchiha Sasuke before she got stuck in a rut and stayed a simple genin forever. Ignoring the pink-haired girl's presence, Minato settled himself in the chair next to Kakashi. He wanted to ask Kakashi to hand Naruto over, but worried at hurting the unconscious boy. So he simply sat there, uncharacteristically indecisive, and switched between watching Naruto breathe and observing the others clumped around the recently out-of-use operating room. "What do you think will happen to Sasuke-kun, Kakashi-sensei?" the girl asked timidly. "It's hard to say for sure," Kakashi shrugged. "But he will be punished." "Whatever he gets, he deserves it," Shikamaru remarked. He'd calmed down, and the only evidence that he'd been crying a few minutes earlier was that his eyes were a bit red and puffy. His actions hurt a lot of our comrades, some almost died. And for what? So he could join up with Orochimaru, a traitor and enemy of Konoha. He thought he had to leave, Sakura protested softly. He needed to get stronger to kill his brother and avenge his clan. That's no excuse, Minato frowned, barely keeping his growing anger out of his voice. Hokage-sama, the pink-haired girl squeaked. I didn't see you there. If he wished to grow stronger, all he had to do was train harder, he continued. If he wanted help, all he had to do was ask for it. Sakura bowed her head and seemed to wilt in on herself. I tried to convince him to say. I begged and pleaded with him. I even threatened to scream so that others would come and stop him. But I couldn't change his mind, I couldn't stop him. She bowed to him. I am sorry for my failure, Hokage-sama. Don't blame yourself, you did what you could. It was Sasuke's choice to do what he did. The blame for this mess rests entirely on his shoulders. Minato settled back in his seat, suddenly feeling very tired. What a mess this is, why don't you go home? Kakashi will inform you if anything significant changes. The girl straightened up a bit. Actually, I was hoping to speak with Tsunade-sama about something. She's rather busy at the moment, why don't you come back in a few hours? Minato suggested. She gnawed at her lip thoughtfully for a moment before shaking her head. I think I'll wait here. Mind made up, she took a seat a few chairs down from him and settled in to wait for her turn. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. Hey Dad, do you need my help getting the book back home? Nah, I've got it, Shikaku answered lazily and pushed off the wall he'd been leaning against to retrieve the ancient Nara clan book of medicine he'd lent to Tsunade to help treat Chuji. I'll tell your mother that you made it home. Great, Shikamaru groaned and slumped down into the open chair next to Kakashi. Sabaku no Temari took this opportunity to abandon her seat a few chairs down from Shikamaru and approached Minato. Yandame Hokage-sama, she began formally with a respectful bow. The mission is complete, and Suna has fulfilled its obligations. When are we free to depart home? You may leave any time you wish, Minato replied, though you are welcome to rest here for a few days. Suna's assistance in this matter is greatly appreciated. Please convey Konoha's thanks to your elders. Thank you, Yandame Hokage-sama. The Suna Kunoichi bowed and started to leave, but hesitated and eyed the limp Naruto balanced on Kakashi's knees. Would it be alright if my younger brother Gaara visited Naruto before we left? Minato's first impulse was to tell her no, absolutely not, but he held his tongue and forced himself to consider the request. From what he'd seen of Sabaku no Gaara, the red-haired boy was a ruthless killer. He showed his opponents no mercy. If he fought them, they would die. In his opinion, Guy had been lucky to dissuade the young Sunanin from slaughtering Rock Lee in the preliminaries of the Chunin exam. However, the murderous boy seemed to have developed some sort of self-control since then. He defended Rock Lee, the boy he'd once tried to kill, and brought him safely back to Konoha unharmed. The fact that Gaara had accepted the mission at all seemed to indicate that he wasn't the same as he'd been before. So maybe? If Naruto is up for the visit, then yes, Gaara may see him, Minato answered finally. Thank you, Hokage-sama, she bowed again, more deeply this time. I will let him know. And with that, she departed to locate her brothers. When she was out of sight, he sighed deeply and slumped down in his chair and closed his eyes. It was barely noon and all he wanted to do was go home, curl up in bed, and not get up until the next morning. But he was the Hokage. He wasn't allowed to abandon his responsibilities and sulk like he wanted to. A whimper to his right brought him back to the immediate present, and he glanced over at his son. Naruto wasn't quite limp and still anymore. He sat up a bit straighter in Kakashi's supporting arm, weakly lifted his head off the copy-nin's shoulder, and cracked open his eyes to peer blearily around. Minato frowned uneasily at the dull look in the boy's normally vibrant blue eyes. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto mumbled faintly. Where? We're back in Konoha, in the hospital, Kakashi replied quietly. Sasuke? He croaked weakly. He's being taken care of right now, Kakashi answered. Don't worry about a thing, it's all over now. Oh. Naruto started to drift off, but picked up his drooping head and squinted over at his father. Hokage Gigi? What are you? What am I doing here? Minato finished the faint question. I'm hiding from the mountains of paper on my desk, he answered quite seriously. Naruto's blank expression melted into childish befuddlement. Huh? I think he's joking, Naruto, Kakashi remarked, clearly smirking behind his mask. The boy blinked. Oh. So, how are you feeling? Minato asked. Tired, Naruto muttered, and sore. Tsunade-sama should be back soon to look you over, Minato smiled faintly. It sounds like Sasuke didn't hurt him too badly. He probably just exhausted his chakra reserves again. Thank goodness. Naruto blinked sluggishly before sighing deeply. Can I just go home? Minato shook his head. Nope. Ugh, Naruto groaned and leaned back into Kakashi's arm. Sabaku no Gaara might stop by to visit you later, Minato warned. Gaara? Naruto scratched at his spiky blonde hair, confused. Gaara's here? Yes, I sent a request to Suna for some backup on your mission and they sent Gaara and his siblings to help, Minato explained. Oh, okay. Naruto stared down at his dirty, bruised hands for a few minutes before looking up again. Are you sure I can't just go home? I'll stay in bed and be good, I promise. Naruto, you can barely sit up on your own, Sakura snapped before Minato could more gently refuse the request. She folded her arms over her chest and took the tone of a mother scolding her whining young child. You may not be hurt as badly as the others, but you still need medical attention, so just stop complaining and wait your turn. The others? Naruto repeated and turned pale. Chuji, Niji, Kiba, they never caught up, did they? No, they didn't, Shikamaru answered from a few seats away. He'd looked asleep with his eyes closed, and his head leaned back against the wall. Minato had almost forgotten that he was there. They got too hurt to join back up, but they won their fights and they didn't die. Naruto remained very pale, but he visibly relaxed at hearing that none of his teammates had died. He sighed and slumped sideways into Kakashi's chest. The silver-haired Jounin gently tightened his arm around his battered student and glanced around, as if willing Tsunade to reappear. The pink-haired Kunoichi, perhaps bored from sitting and waiting and seeking some distraction, abandoned her seat to examine her worn-out teammate who she had practically ignored earlier. Minato watched as her pale green eyes swept over Naruto's hunched, battered form. Her gaze stopped at an impressive fist-sized hole in the shoulder of his orange and blue jacket, and in the black t-shirt he wore underneath, that revealed Naruto's slightly raw-looking skin. What did you do to your coat, Naruto? She asked curiously. What little color had returned to Naruto's face since hearing about his friend's poor state of health abruptly fled, leaving him a sickly ashen gray. I don't want to talk about it, he whispered almost inaudibly and turned his face into Kakashi's dull green flak jacket. Minato went rigid. That was not Naruto. When Naruto didn't want to talk about something, he'd change the subject, or fidget nervously, and then change the subject. He only refused to talk about something if he was being badgered about a subject he didn't want to discuss. Naruto never refused to talk and curled up into a meek little ball like this. Uchiha Sasuke. Minato clenched his teeth until they ached. What have you done to my son? It was all some terrible, horrible nightmare. It couldn't be real. It was just some sick, twisted dream. It wasn't real. Just a dream, just a dream, just a dream. His shoulder bumped against the bed rail and he felt a short burst of fiery agony in response. No. It hadn't been a dream. Sasuke team had really run off with those Otonin to seek Orochimaru for power. He'd really gone off with his friends to get him back. His friends had really gotten hurt bad. He and Sasuke had really fought like that, in the Valley of the End. Sasuke had really run a Chidori through his shoulder. Sasuke had really broken his neck. His best friend had really tried to kill him. He took a deep, shaky breath and choked a little at the strong antiseptic hospital smell that invaded his nose. For some reason his senses, especially his sense of smell, were still a little heightened. Normally they were only that way when he was channeling the fox's chakra, and he wasn't right now. He was just lying on a hospital bed, being miserable. Shifting stiffly onto his good side, the one with his uninjured shoulder, he closed his blue eyes and tried vainly to go back to sleep and forget that the last few days had ever happened. But he'd already slept a lot, nearly a full day straight by his guess. He simply wasn't sleepy anymore. However, his body still felt weak and achy, a sensation he was not at all accustomed to. Stupid fox team, he thought darkly. Aren't you supposed to fix me up? Why am I not better yet? There was no answer. He hadn't expected any. If he had gotten a reply, he would have been freaked out. But an answer would have been nice. The door to his room slowly scraped open and Naruto cracked open one eye to see who had come to visit him. The person on the other side of the door seemed to hesitate before stepping into his line of vision. It was the only person that he expected to come see him, Gaara. The red-haired Suna Jinchuriki slowly crept up to his bedside and stopped about a foot away. The creepy, stoic boy looked uncharacteristically anxious and timid. And Naruto noticed that Gaara's sandstone gourd, which contained his sand and was always strapped to his back, was missing. Hey Gaara, where's your sand? Naruto asked curiously, slightly annoyed at how weak and crackly his voice sounded. The Hokage would not let me visit you if I didn't leave my sand outside the hospital, Gaara replied in his usual monotone voice. Naruto frowned slightly, and itched at some of the bandages wrapped around his neck. He really didn't need any bandages. He hadn't been bleeding from anywhere when Kakashi-sensei had brought him in. The only reason he could see for the bandages was that the medics had decided to wrap him up like a mummy for the heck of it. That's weird, he muttered and slowly, stiffly wriggled into a sitting position on his bed. So, how are you? I'm alright. Gaara shifted uncomfortably. How are you? Just a little sore, Naruto answered with a big grin. I'll be fine in no time. That's good, Gaara nodded awkwardly. Naruto tilted his head curiously at the other boy. Did you want to ask me something, Gaara? Gaara folded his arms tighter over his chest and stared uncomfortably at the tile floor. Naruto simply sat and waited for the other boy to gather his thoughts. The other boy, his sort of friend, needed his help and he would give it. I wonder. Gaara's dull blue-green eyes slowly traced the lines of the tile floor underneath his open-toed Zora sandals. I wonder if I should feel sad that the Yondaime Kazekage is dead. He was my father, and shouldn't children be sad when a parent dies? Naruto itched at his bandages again and feverishly considered this problem. What a sticky question. Well, are your brother and sister sad that he's dead? No. And Naruto frowned in deep concentration. You told me in Shikamaru that he tried to assassinate you when you didn't turn out the way that he wanted, right? Yes. Is anyone sad that Orochimaru killed him? Naruto wondered. Not that I know of. Naruto scratched at his spiky blonde hair as he considered how to answer. Normally he'd just go with the first thing that came to mind, but this was too important to just wing it. Gaara was what he could have been had his father tried to forge him into a living weapon, what he could have been had he never made any friends. It's kinda hard for me to say since I didn't know the guy personally, but since nobody seems to miss him, not even your brother and sister, and since he's sent assassins after you a bunch of times, you shouldn't worry about being sad about him being dead. He may have been a great ninja, he was the Kazekage after all, but he sounds like a really lousy human being. So what if he was your dad by blood? He didn't treat you like his son and it doesn't sound like he acted like much of a dad, so it's more like you were strangers to each other, not family. Naruto trailed off and anxiously scratched at the back of his neck. Am I making any sense to you? The Sunanin stared at the floor for a long time before finally raising his dark-ringed eyes up to Naruto's blue ones. I think so. Well, if you need any more help with this, I'm sure that your brother and sister would be a lot more help than me, Naruto laughed sheepishly. They'd know more about how things were in your family than I would. Gaara nodded sharply. Thank you for your help, Uzumaki Naruto. You're welcome. Naruto grinned widely. Not sure if I was helpful at all, but okay. My siblings and I must return to Suna. Gaara bowed to him and slowly exited the room. Farewell, Naruto. Bye, Gaara. Naruto waved cheerfully. Have a safe trip home. As soon as the door slid shut, Naruto allowed the cheery facade to fall away. He rubbed at his sore shoulder and laid back down on his bed to stare at the ceiling tiles. Really, he was glad to have helped Gaara with his problem. But I couldn't reach Sasuke. Minato slumped forward with a sigh and rested his forehead against the cool wood of his desk. It was around dinner time, and he was still trapped in his office. Well, he wasn't actually trapped. He could leave any time. But the thought of returning to an empty, Naruto-less house was very unappealing. Stacks of papers and scrolls covered the rest of his desk and formed some rather impressive piles. Thankfully only about a quarter of it was real, the rest was just a genjutsu. It was a little trick he'd picked up from the Sandaime that made him look ridiculously busy so that whiny little genin didn't whine quite so much when they drew their D-rank missions. However, the part that was real occupied most of his day. Why did I want this job again? He groaned wearily. It certainly wasn't to swim through paperwork all day and deal with fresh gen and complaining about being stuck reading, babysitting, or catching that damn cat for the nth time. He lifted his head off his desk and flopped back limply in his chair. What I wouldn't give for a vacation. It's getting late. Why don't you go home? Minato sat up straighter to see over the piles of paper and found his old teacher, Jiraiya, leaning on the doorframe. His towering mentor raised a white eyebrow at him, questioning. For the briefest moment, it was like they'd gone back in time and Jiraiya was his Jounin sensei, and he was the green rookie genin tied to the post at the end of the belt test. I don't want to, Minato sighed. It's too quiet at home. Then go to the hospital, Jiraiya snorted. But it's late. You're the Hokage, Jiraiya interrupted. Only Tsunadeheim has the guts to kick you out, and I doubt that she will. Unable to formulate any other excuse that didn't sound completely pathetic, Minato abandoned his desk and leapt out one of his office windows in the direction of the hospital. He hopped from roof to roof, his long, flame-trimmed jacket flapping behind him like a cape. Following a few roofs behind was Jiraiya. Minato stubbornly ignored his mentor's presence. It wasn't that he didn't want to see Naruto. He ached to see his son. What he didn't want was to hear Naruto's report of what happened on the retrieval mission. So far he'd only read Naruto Shikamaru's report, as he'd been the team leader, and Rock Lee's account, as he'd been healthy enough to give it. He'd been chilled as he read how Shikamaru had been forced to sacrifice his friends, one by one, to neutralize the party of higher-level Otonin who had been spiriting Sasuke away. And the strength, skill, and dedication to Orochimaru's cause, as described by Shikamaru and Lee, made him dread getting the rest of the reports from Chuji, Niji, and Kiba. But Naruto's report would be the worst, he sensed. He'd tangled with all the Otonin briefly, and even held off that Kimimaro character solo for a while until Rock Lee intervened, but his primary solo fight had been with a Konohanin, Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto had fought his own teammate and friend and he dreaded finding out just how ugly it had gotten. Minato worried that when he knew exactly what the Uchiha had done to his boy that he would be unable to show Sasuke any mercy when his punishment was to be decided. Squeezing his eyes shut for a moment, he willed the dark thoughts back and picked up the pace slightly as the large hospital building came into view. When he ran out of roofs to jump along, he dropped down to the street and strode right through the front doors. Glancing at the registry, he checked to see what room Naruto had been stashed in, and started to make his way there. Hokage-sama. The receptionist squeaked in surprise. Have you come to see Uchiha Sasuke? He paused briefly and answered a quiet no before continuing down the hall and up the stairs to Naruto's room before the flustered woman could try to talk to him anymore. The halls of the hospital were fairly deserted, as most people that could be home eating dinner with their families were doing that. It was nice to avoid all the people that would feel compelled to stop and greet him simply because he was the Hokage and important. But the echoing halls tainted with the faint beeps and whirs of medical equipment were undeniably eerie. When he came to Naruto's door, he hesitated. If Naruto was asleep, he didn't want to disturb him. And this is ridiculous. Minato snorted at himself. I'm being pathetic and silly. Shaking his head, he grasped the door handle, slid it open, and stepped inside. The lights were dimmed, but not off. There were no beeps or whirs. Naruto didn't need any fancy medical equipment like that. Glancing around, Minato didn't even see an four-stand setup. There was a mostly untouched meal tray on the bedside table. And Naruto lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Minato slowly turned up the lights and shut the door behind him. A quick look at the hospital-provided dinner showed him that there was nothing there that Naruto wouldn't want to eat. So seeing all the food there, uneaten, was very worrisome. I thought onigiri was your favorite food after ramen, he remarked quietly. Naruto flinched and tore his eyes away from the ceiling to gape at him. Huh! Your dinner, Minato nodded towards the tray. You didn't eat any of it. I'm not really hungry, Naruto muttered. He chewed nervously at his lip. You want me to report now? You don't have to talk about it yet if you don't want to. Minato picked up one of the chairs along the wall and set it next to Naruto's bed so he could sit down. It can wait a few more days before I need it. Oh, the boy sighed and closed his eyes in relief, which only made Minato dread what he would eventually find out even more. Pushing back his worry, he picked up the dinner tray, picked up the chopsticks, and picked up a piece of chicken. Hey, Naruto. Naruto grunted and opened one eye. Do you want to get out of the hospital faster? Naruto immediately shot upright. Yeah. Then, Minato smirked and held out the chicken with the chopsticks. Eat your dinner. His son eyed the bit of chicken warily for a moment before leaning in and biting it off the chopsticks. Minato grinned and held out another bit of chicken with the chopsticks. By the third bite, Naruto had had enough. I can feed myself, old man. The boy sputtered, his cheeks flushed a little in embarrassment. All right, Minato chuckled and handed over the meal tray and chopsticks. Enjoy. Naruto scowled over at him before practically inhaling his food. In the blink of an eye, the chicken was gone and he'd moved on to the small onigiri. But halfway through the second rice ball, he paused and looked up from the tray with confusion flickering in his wide eyes. If you're not here to get my report, and you're definitely not here to watch me eat, why are you here? What? Minato frowned slightly. I need some official reason to come visit you? His son shrugged awkwardly and dropped his eyes back down to his now mostly cleared dinner tray. I was just wondering if there was a reason, he muttered and stuffed the rest of the onigiri in his mouth. Minato slowed a sigh and waited until Naruto had devoured the rest of his dinner before speaking again. Are you feeling better today? I guess, Naruto mumbled. It's like I'm tired, but I'm not sleepy. I can sit up, but I can't get out of bed. I tried, but my legs wouldn't work, so I just sat on the floor until one of the nurses found me and stuck me back in bed. He fisted his hands in the bed sheets. I want to go home. I don't like it here. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll be out of here soon. Minato smiled and gently laid one hand over both of Naruto's small fists. If they keep you more than a week, I'll be shocked. Naruto sighed and sunk back on the bed. Do I really need all these bandages? He complained, itching at the offending material on his right wrist. I wasn't even bleeding when I got here. They're probably just a precaution, Minato shrugged. You won't have to wear them for very long. The boy pouted. They're itchy. Try not to think about them, Minato advised. Gah! Naruto groaned. I'm bored, Databeo. Now that would be a problem. Minato chuckled softly and folded his arms over his chest as he considered the issue. How to distract him while keeping him in bed shogi won't work. I don't think he even knows how to play. He's not in the academy anymore, so he doesn't have any homework to do. I don't think he'd been interested in just studying scrolls. Maybe I could. Yeah, that might work. I think I've got it. Minato grinned and fished around in his pocket for a particular scrap of paper. Got what? Naruto frowned. You'll find out in a minute, Minato replied and pulled a seal paper out of his pocket and stuck it on the wall next to the door. What are you putting up a Horatian seal for, old man? The boy asked suspiciously. I need to go get something, Minato answered and winked. I'll be back in a flash. Silently laughing at his own joke, he gathered his chakra, focused on the seal marker set in the library of his house, and warped there with a flash of yellow light. Easily brushed aside the slight dizziness brought on by the technique from long experience, he scanned the shelves packed with books and scrolls for what he had come for. About 3 minutes later, he located the book he wanted, removed the yellow novel from its shelf, and flashed back to the seal he just placed in Naruto's hospital room. What did you get? Naruto asked warily. This. Minato smiled and handed over the yellow book for Naruto to examine. The Legend of the Gutsy Ninja? Naruto muttered as he read the title. He narrowed his eyes at the author's name. Gamakage? Hey, that's Erosenin's stupid pen name. His son stared up at him, incredulous and a little disgusted. You brought me porn? No, I didn't bring you porn, Minato corrected as he sat back down in the chair by Naruto's bed. Do you see any label on it that restricts it to readers 18 and up? No, Naruto muttered after examining every inch of the book cover. Did Erosenin really write this? Yes, Jiraiya really did write it. In fact, it's the very first book he wrote, Minato informed the skeptical boy. His son glared dubiously at the yellow book in his hands. Are you sure this isn't porn? This book is nothing like Jiraiya-sensei's Come Paradise series, I promise, Minato sighed and took the book from Naruto. I used to read you chapters of this book as bedtime stories when you were little. Really? Naruto scratched at the back of his head. I think I remember that kinda sorta. Well, Minato opened the book to the first chapter. Let's see just what you remember of this. That was so cute, Jiraiya teased as he hunted through Minato's refrigerator for a snack. Reading him my old book to him like that, he let out a booming laugh so very sweet. You were sitting outside the window the entire time, weren't you? Minato stated more than asked as he leaned against his kitchen counter and watched his old teacher examine a takeout crate he'd found. Stop stealing my food, sensei. I'm not stealing your food, Jiraiya protested as he dug a pair of chopsticks out of a drawer and started to eat whatever he'd found inside the takeout box. Minato sighed and rubbed his temples. Why didn't you join us? I'm sure that Naruto would have liked a visit from you too. I wasn't about to intrude on such a wonderful father-son bonding moment, Jiraiya snorted. Besides, I can always visit him later. I suppose. Minato undid the clasp of his jacket and shrugged it off. Thanks. You're very welcome. Jiraiya laughed. Anything for my favorite student. Minato chuckled at that declaration and unzipped his flak jacket. I'm still your favorite student, eh? Of course. Jiraiya declared. You will always be my favorite student. What about Naruto? Minato asked as he untied his hide and traced his thumb over the swirling leaf symbol etched into the metal plate. Where does he rank in your heart, sensei? Why, he's my second favorite student, and my favorite godson, answered cheerfully. Ah, I see, Minato grinned and ran a hand through his shaggy blonde hair. Jiraiya set aside the now empty takeout container, and his cheery expression sobered into seriousness. Minato, I've been meaning to ask you something. What is it? Minato asked warily. I want to make Naruto my apprentice, and I want to take him away from Konoha for a while. Minato felt his blood turn to ice. How long is a while? 2 or 3 years at least, Jiraiya replied. Minato clung to the edge of the counter until his knuckles turned white. And why do you want to do this? For a few reasons, Jiraiya replied and folded his arms over his chest, effortlessly sliding into lecture mode. The Akatsuki want him. Itachi proved that when he and his partner tried to kidnap him when I was taking him to track down Tsunade. They don't need him yet. They didn't put up much of a fight when I came on the scene and interrupted their efforts. But one day they will need him and they won't stop until they get him. By taking him out of Konoha as my apprentice, I can make him stronger and teach him how to protect himself against those that will hunt him. I can keep us off the Akatsuki's radar, teach him about my information network, and show him the world beyond the village. And away from the village there will be no distractions from his training, no chasing after that pink-haired girl he likes so much, no squabbling with other boys, no missions. Also, leaving the village will allow me to help him work with the fox's chakra without much worry of interference. You know that if I try to train him too much with it in the village that the council will throw up an awful stink with about it. Really, taking Naruto out of Konoha for a while is the most efficient way to get him ready. It was a good argument. The reasons were perfectly sound. Minato could see no way around what Jiraiya was telling him. If the Akatsuki got their hands on Naruto, they would tear the Kyuubi out of him, use the demon for their own shadowy purposes, and leave his son dead. But the thought of sending Naruto off into the world with only Jiraiya for company for years without any contact with home made him feel cold inside. I'd like for Naruto to attempt the Chunin exams one more time before you run off with him, Minato said finally. It would be ideal if he could make Chunin, but whether he earns his promotion or not you're free to take him then. It's a little risky, Jiraiya mused. But I can work with that. If something comes up, you can take him sooner, Minato sighed, but... I understand. Jiraiya grabbed an apple and patted Minato on the shoulder as he headed for the front door. Go get some sleep. I'm sure that the council will start leaning on you to deal with that troublesome Uchiha boy tomorrow. Thanks for reminding me of that, sensei, Minato muttered, but his old teacher was already gone. Shaking his head, he left the kitchen for his bedroom with his Hokage coat and flak jacket tucked under one arm. Putting his things away and changing into a pair of sleep pants, he collapsed onto his bed and tried to get comfortable. He sighed wearily and glanced over at a picture frame on his bedside table that was illuminated by a stray moonbeam. A beautiful young woman smiled back at him with her long red hair spilling over her shoulders like a waterfall and her blue-green eyes sparkling with laughter. I wish you were here. Minato clenched his teeth as he skimmed Kakashi's brief report. His former student didn't have much to tell. He'd simply tracked Sasuke with his summoned dogs, observed the final move of Naruto and Sasuke's fight, captured Sasuke before the boy could flee, and brought both boys back to the hospital. However, for all its shortness, what information Kakashi's report did contain made Minato shudder with restrained fury. The Chidori versus the Rasengan, he mused grimly. That's bad enough by itself. But what is this monstrous form that Kakashi describes Sasuke as having? Where did it come from? I can understand the fox-shaped cloak of chakra around Naruto. That would be the Kyuubi's doing. But Sasuke isn't a Jinchuriki like Naruto, so how? Sensei? Minato peered up from his reading to find Kakashi standing before him. You wanted to see me? Yes, Minato nodded and set the report aside. I want you to come with me to interview Uchiha Sasuke. Ah, Kakashi sighed in understanding. Without any further conversation, Minato abandoned his desk and headed towards the hospital at a fairly leisurely pace, for a shinobi, with Kakashi a step behind him. Words were not necessary between them. They'd been together long enough to not need to speak to understand what was going on. Minato had first met Hatake Kakashi when he'd first made Jounin, and Kakashi had passed the Genin exam. Kakashi was the genius of his generation. He'd skipped countless grades and passed the exam at the ridiculously young age of 6. As he was so much younger than his classmates, he wasn't put on a 3-man squad like the rest, and Minato had been assigned as his private tutor. Besides simply being a child prodigy, Kakashi had been incredibly driven as a child. His father, Hatake Tsukumo, Konoha's White Fang, had been a great shinobi in his day, but after one disaster mission, the elder Hatake had brought such shame, completely undeserved in Minato's humble opinion, upon the family name that he ended up wandering out into the forest behind his home and committing suicide. Kakashi had barely been 5 at the time, and had idolized his father. Tsukumo's shame and shameful death hit him hard, and he redoubled his efforts in training. He strictly adhered to the rules and the codes of the shinobi, believing that his father's disgrace was brought about entirely by his father's choice to save his comrades instead of completing his mission. By the time Minato took on 2 more students, evening out his squad, which was then officially dubbed Team 7, Kakashi was 12 and had been a chunin for almost 4 years. Even though both new students were fairly talented for their age group, Rin was a promising young medic, mostly self-taught from books, and Obito was an Uchiha with a knack for ninjutsu. They didn't measure up to the standards of Kakashi the genius prodigy. So the silver-haired boy held himself aloof from them, ignoring Rin's timid affection and relentlessly baiting the hot-tempered and slightly clumsy Obito. Although Minato was just supposed to be Kakashi's sensei, he tried to do more for his stoic first student. He tried to persuade Kakashi to move in with him, but the proud boy refused and stubbornly lived alone. He tried to encourage the boy to make friends. That was his secondary reason for taking on Rin and Obito, but Kakashi remained apart. It took another death close to him to get Kakashi to change. The Third Great Shinobi War was intensifying to the point where squads containing young genin were being sent out on war-related missions. He and his students had pulled an assignment in grass country where they were to destroy a bridge. Partway there, they had run into some enemy Iwanin and learned of an impending attack miles away. As he was the fastest, Minato had left to spread the warning, and he'd left Kakashi, who'd recently made Jounin at 13, in charge. In hindsight, that was a mistake. Another small squad of Iwanin had been nearby, and shortly after he'd left, one had kidnapped Rin. Kakashi had wanted to continue on to the bridge, but Obito refused and went after Rin. Obito got himself in trouble with one of the Iwanin, and Kakashi had to rescue him, but at the cost of his left eye. Upset at being useless and determined not to be anymore, Obito had managed to awaken his Sharingan and used it to win the fight. Together they'd advanced on the cave where Rin was tied up and attacked the enemy guarding her. They freed her, but at a cost. The roof of the cave collapsed and Obito was mostly crushed. Dying, he gave up one of his Sharingan eyes to replace Kakashi's ruined one and made the young Jounin promise to protect Rin. The surgery was a success, thanks to Rin's skill, and Kakashi gained the eye that would later make him famous, or infamous, depending on who was asked. That death, like the death of his father years earlier, deeply affected Kakashi. While he still strived to complete his missions, he now strained to defend his teammates, determined not to lose anyone else. It made Minato proud, but he dearly wished that it hadn't come at such a high cost. Then Rin had gone too. In one of the last engagements of the war with Iwa, she'd been working as a field medic while Kakashi and Minato had been at separate battlefronts. When the smoke cleared in her fight, she'd vanished without a trace, and was presumed dead. No one had seen her since. And it was back to just him and Kakashi. Kushina had drifted in and settled into their lives shortly after Rin's disappearance. With the war mostly over, there were only small skirmishes with Kumo still lingering on. They weren't so busy fighting that they were actually in Konoha at the same time for more than a day or 2 at a time. He'd started dating her, well, sort of, and she sort of adopted Kakashi as her new little brother. They formed a strange little family in a way. Kakashi looked up to him, almost like a second father. Kushina was his older sister, almost a new mother. And Jiraiya, when he was around, was sort of like the cool, fun uncle. If only things could have stayed that way, Minato sighed as the hospital came into view. But no, just as things were looking up and settling down, he'd made Hokage. He and Kushina were going to have a baby and then get married, and Kakashi had been made ANBU at 15. The Kyuubi had come. The village teetered on the edge of certain doom. He and the Sandaime had scrambled to find some way, any way, to defeat the monster. Many shinobi died trying to slow the beast as it made its relentless advance. Naruto was born, Kushina died, the Sandaime died performing the sealing, Naruto became the demon's jailer, and then came the aftermath. I buried myself in Hokage business. Kakashi buried himself in ANBU until all the killing nearly destroyed him and retired back to Jounin. Minato touched down at the hospital front doors and straightened out his Hokage jacket. Kakashi landed behind him a half a second later. We drifted apart some, buried ourselves in work, and left Naruto to rot until he forced his way back into the forefront of our lives. Minato strode purposefully through the hospital halls up to Uchiha Sasuke's secure room, Kakashi hot on his heels. He nodded distractedly to the masked ANBU that guarded the Uchiha boys' door before stepping inside. Once Kakashi entered the room, he shut the door, giving them a measure of privacy. The young Uchiha was strapped securely to his bed and covered in paper seals to interrupt his chakra flow to prevent escape. There were a few IVs in his arm, a scattering of bruises that stood out against his pale skin, and his eyes were still blindfolded by bandages, but otherwise he looked untouched. Seals and restraints aside, he looked healthier than Naruto. With a nod to Kakashi, Minato averted his eyes from the young Uchiha's face as his former student unwound the bandages that formed the blindfold. Even though Sasuke's chakra network was interrupted and suppressed by the seals, there was some risk that the boy would be able to gather enough chakra to activate his eyes. It was a risky move to allow the Uchiha to see, but it was necessary to properly gauge the boy's reactions. Kakashi would be able to safely observe the black-haired boy through Obito's eye, which was a big part of the reason that Minato had brought him along. The other main reason for bringing Kakashi was that he was the boy's teacher. He was the closest adult in Uchiha Sasuke's life after the massacre of his clan, and he was the best candidate to help pry information out of the boy. Kakashi was able to read between the lines with Sasuke, whereas Minato would only be able to guess at the hidden meanings in the boy's terse sentences. Uchiha Sasuke, Minato fixed his eyes on the boy's right hand. What do you have to say for yourself? The boy remained stubbornly silent. I don't need to look at your eyes to know that you're awake, Minato frowned. I have nothing to say. The boy's voice was cold, flat, and utterly emotionless. You willfully deserted the village, knocked out one teammate, led to the grievous injury of several of your fellow classmates and comrades, and nearly killed your other teammate, Minato recited sharply. Now, what do you have to say for yourself? I have nothing to say, Sasuke repeated flatly. You may have nothing to say, Kakashi remarked after a moment, but you have a great deal to answer for. So start answering. Outsiders have no right to know Uchiha clan business, Sasuke replied icily. It pains me to say it, Sasuke, but your clan is dead, Minato quietly reminded the boy. A clan cannot be a single person. So the Uchiha clan's special privileges are suspended until the day you have a family of your own and reapply for clan status. His voice turned hard. Your actions cannot be protected by clan privilege. And if you were somehow still protected by those privileges, your actions would still not be excused. Because of you, several promising young Konohanin were injured and could have died. That level of betrayal demands punishment. It was clan business, the boy coldly insisted. Konoha has no right to interfere. At this rate you'll end up with the Biki and the torture squad, Kakashi warned. It would be much better for you if started giving us real answers, Sasuke. It was clan business, Sasuke growled. I promised my family vengeance, no matter what the cost. I need more power. Orochimaru promised it to me. So I was going to claim it. Had you not chosen to interfere, they wouldn't have gotten hurt. The sheer arrogance and complete lack of empathy astounded Minato. It was an attitude he might have expected to find in a hardened adult ninja, but in a rookie genin like Sasuke it was simply horrifying. Minato fought back the urge to pick the boy up by his shoulders, shake him, and scream, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouldn't have let him live alone, Minato shuddered as his blue eyes continued to stare at Sasuke's hand. I should have insisted that he find some guardian to live with. I should have taken him into my own house. Naruto would have loved that. Why did I even consider letting him live in the Uchiha clan compound where his entire clan was murdered? Why did you attack Naruto? Minato asked, shifting his approach. He was in my way, the Uchiha replied flatly. And since our last fight was so rudely interrupted, I decided it was time to finish things once and for all. What did you hope that this fight would prove? Kakashi inquired. That I always have been and always will be better than him, the boy answered matter-of-factly. He's a pathetic washout that never should have made genin. He's an embarrassment. By getting rid of him I would have done everyone a favor. That's a cover if I ever heard one, Kakashi snorted before Minato could snap something that he might later regret. What's the truth then? Sasuke sneered. I say that you are both jealous of Naruto and afraid of him, Kakashi replied after making a show of giving the matter very deep thought. Naruto has made great strides, absolutely amazing progress. He's advanced so much, so quickly, that even though you have grown stronger and more skilled as well, it feels like you're standing still. And that leads to your fear. Fear that he might completely close the gap between you two, equal you, surpass you, and prove you wrong about everything you've ever said or thought about him. You fear that someone you perceive as a failure, No-name ninja can outdo you, the last of your elite, noble clan. That's absurd. Sasuke snarled, displaying the first real emotion of the interview. My wasting my time to fight him was simply a means to an end. I'm not jealous of that dog, nor am I afraid of him. A means to an end, you say? Minato repeated icily. In what way? By defeating him, the closest person left to me, I would gain the same power that my brother gained before he slaughtered the clan, the boy growled tensely, his limp hands clenching into fists. And with that power in my possession, I would be able to meet Itachi on level ground and defeat him. What is this power? Kakashi demanded sternly. The ultimate power. There was a smirk in his voice. The Manjikyu Sharingan. It took several minutes before either adult could speak. Why Naruto? Minato asked finally, struggling to keep his voice calm. Why did you have to beat Naruto? Why not someone else? Naruto was ideal for what I needed to do, Sasuke explained calmly. Of all those around me, I can say that I was closest to him, and he to me. I could trust him to do just about anything for me, and I respect his limited abilities. He's even more alone than I am. Sakura dislikes him, everyone else thinks he's just a class clown. He's an orphan, no one's ever heard if he has a guardian of any kind, let alone seen one. If I succeeded in obtaining the Manjikyu Sharingan, if I killed my best friend, then no one would miss Naruto, and the village would be spared the embarrassment of his existence. I would miss Naruto, Kakashi replied coldly, as would Irika, and Sakura, and many others. You greatly misjudge him, Sasuke. Minato barely heard Kakashi's defense of his son to the Uchiha. The fact that the boy would consider Naruto his best friend and then so callously decide to kill him to gain some terrible power made him sick. He wanted nothing more than to put a stop to this insanity before it hurt his son any more than it already had. But the only solution that came to mind involved simply killing the Uchiha boy and ending everything there, and that just was not an option. Know this, Uchiha-san, Minato growled, barely able to contain his icy fury. If you ever gain these eyes that you so desire at the cost of Uzumaki Naruto's life, then consider your days numbered very short, and your older brother will be the least of your problems. Issuing death threats over the life of one worthless genin, Hokage-sama? Sasuke scoffed in disbelief. Every life has worth, no matter how great or small, even the life of an enemy, Minato retorted coldly. It's really a pity that you don't understand that. I wonder if you ever really learned the lesson of my bell test, Kakashi remarked sadly. Shinobi who disrespect the rules are trash, but those who do not care for their teammates are even worse trash. But you, Sasuke, you have willfully attacked both your teammates, and you have managed to lower yourself beneath even that. There is no word to describe how low you have sunk among those who call themselves Shinobi of Konoha. If you were not worth more alive than dead, you would have been executed already. Sasuke replied with nothing more than stony silence. Unable to stomach standing near the boy any longer, Minato gestured to Kakashi to bind the Uchiha's eyes again and strode quickly from the room. He paused just long enough to pass instructions to the ANBU guards to prepare the boy to be moved to an operating room that he had set aside to perform the sealing on Sasuke's curse mark. With that chore done, he left the secure wing of the hospital behind for one of the recovery rooms. Hey, Hokage Gigi! Naruto half-shouted in greeting as he swept in through the door. I guess the paperwork must not be so bad this week, you've been coming to see me a lot. Minato simply couldn't bring himself to smile at the bad joke. He just parked himself on Naruto's bed and pulled the boy into his lap to better hug him. The youngest Uchiha's dark ambitions chilled him to the core, and all he wished to do was protect his son from them. But he was already too late. Sasuke lay compliant on his hospital cot and made no protest as Kakashi rebound his eyes with bandages. Even after several days' rest, he was still exhausted from his latest escapade, and with his chakra blocked by seals, there was simply no way he could break free from his bonds. And even if he could have freed himself, there were countless Konoha shinobi that would stop any escape attempt that he made. So he simply lay still and let it happen. He had waited 4 long years to become a shinobi so that he could start on his path of vengeance. He could wait a little longer. His capture by his former comrades was simply an inconvenient bump in the road. Sooner or later an opportunity would present itself to him, and he could slip away and reach Orochimaru and all that the traitorous Sannin offered, power. That power was the next step towards fulfilling his greatest ambition. Once he had it, he could slay Itachi and give the souls of his slaughtered family peace. Only then would he be free. When he was younger, after the nightmare had happened, he had made a solemn vow to exact justice on his older brother. No matter what the cost was to himself, no matter what he had to do to kill his brother, he would do it. There was simply nothing else he could do. It was his destiny, his sole purpose in life. Even if he had to die to do it, as long as Itachi died, it would all be worth it. He was well aware that Orochimaru had some ulterior motives in granting him the power that he'd offered. The cursed seal he'd been given in the Forest of Death and the later enhancement passed along by the Sound 4 after his interrupted duel on the hospital roof were only hints of what was to come. Acquiring more power from the snake was dangerous, but well worth the risks. It's too bad that Naruto survived, he mused. If it wasn't for that strange chakra, that red chakra, he would be dead and I would have the Manjikyu Sharingan. I suppose that power was what Itachi was after when he and that other man showed up a few months ago and tried to abduct Naruto. I wish that you had listened to me about seeking revenge, Kakashi said sadly. Sasuke didn't bother to reply to that. He just lay still, his eyes now sealed closed by bandages. And eventually he heard Kakashi walk away, leaving him alone. The dark was a shinobi's best friend. It allowed one to move about without being seen. It was a friend, an ally. But Sasuke hated the dark, especially the dark he experienced when he closed his eyes. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it all over again. He saw the streets of the Uchiha district littered with the blood-spattered corpses of his entire clan. He saw his mother, his beautiful, kind, gentle, loving mother, limp in a pool of her own blood underneath the equally still body of his father in the family dojo. And he saw the slaughter play out over and over again through Itachi's Tsukiyomi Genjutsu attack. That was his motivation, his driving force. So long as Itachi lived, the images of his proud clan being culled like defective livestock would never let him rest. The only way to end it would be to kill Itachi the way he killed his own clan. Soon, Aniki, he thought bitterly. Soon you will be as bloody and cold as Ota-san and Oka-san. But you will never have the honor of a proper grave. Let the crows eat your rotten corpse. Even when his father had ignored him, or was too busy for him, a part of him had always admired his father. He was just so cool, and the Hokage too. His dad always knew what to do, how to make things better, how to take out the bad guys. He couldn't be beat. There wasn't a shinobi alive that could touch his dad. In one of his earliest memories, he could recall an incident where some shinobi, who he was or where he came from Naruto either never knew or simply couldn't remember, had snuck into his house and tried to hurt him. He'd been so scared and the bad shinobi had managed to cut his shirt before his father arrived. His dad suddenly just appeared and beat the bad shinobi into the wall. The bad shinobi had shouted some bad things at his dad. What they were, Naruto couldn't remember, he just knew that they were bad. But his dad didn't bat an eye, he just stared the bad guy down until the Master and Biyu came and carried him off to their headquarters where he would be questioned and punished. It was one of Naruto's favorite memories. Not only had his dad saved him from a terrible person who had tried to hurt him, but he'd been so cool doing it. He hadn't been afraid at all, he was so brave and awesome. Naruto wanted to be cool like him when he was grown up. And after the bad man had been taken away, his dad had held him, letting him cry and get snot all over his nice coat, until he fell asleep. His dad even let him sleep in bed with him for a whole week after it happened because of the nightmares. Those were some of the best memories he had of his dad being so nice to him. So when his dad came into his hospital room to see him, looking pale and upset, and held him in his lap to hug him, alarm bells went off in his mind. Naruto knew that sometimes he missed stuff that other people found obvious, but there was no way he could miss this. His dad seemed scared, and his dad was never scared. He was the Hokage. He got mad, he got sad, but he never got scared. This had to be some kind of mistake, or maybe a really bad joke. Hey Gigi. Naruto grinned, as if nothing was wrong. What's up? His father didn't answer him. He didn't say anything at all. He just sat on the hospital bed and hugged Naruto a lot like he had on the night when the bad shinobi had gotten into their house. It just freaked Naruto out. Hey! He squirmed against his father's arms, trying but failing to get enough space so he could look him in the eye. What's going on? Just a rough day, his father finally answered. A lot of whiny genin today? Naruto guessed. I wish. Now Naruto was totally freaked out. His dad was barely talking to him, which wasn't all that new, and he was upset, not angry upset, but more like scared upset. What could possibly freak out his dad, the Hokage who'd stared down countless enemies, even a rampaging fox demon? Can I go home yet? He asked quietly, all his earlier cheer completely gone. Not until Tsunade-sama says it's okay, his father answered automatically. Naruto relaxed against his father's hold, and racked his brains as to what he should do. If he noticed that his dad was mad about something, he'd be quiet and make sure to be extra good so that he wouldn't get even more mad. If he saw that his dad was sad about something, he'd be extra silly to try and cheer him up. But what was he supposed to do when his dad was scared? How could he make it better? Dad? Naruto squeaked anxiously. What's going on? His father gave a little start and glanced down at him with a weak smile. I'm just having a bad day, Naruto, he sighed. And I still have to put a seal on Uchiha Sasuke's curse mark later tonight, too. Even though thinking of his teammate made his shoulder ache, he still had to ask, will he be okay? Sadness infected his father's wavering smile. I really don't know, he admitted. I'm not sure that sealing him will do him much good. Not from what I heard from him today. Oh. Naruto wilted and stared down at his hands. Do you think that I could visit him sometime? His father tensed. I don't think that's a good idea, he said slowly. But if you really want to see him, I'd rather that you wait until after I apply the seals to his mark. Okay, Naruto nodded. Maybe tomorrow then? Maybe, his dad agreed. Do you mind if I stay a while longer? It just seemed too good to be true. This was the second time that his dad had showed up, and the only reason seemed to be that he wanted to hang out. The first time had been shocking, and now the second time it felt like a dream. If it happened for a third time, Naruto figured that the world was going to end. Stay as long as you like, he invited. It's not like you'll visit me again until Tsunade-ba-chan lets me out of here. It was nearly midnight when everything was in place for the sealing. Minato waited in the borrowed operating room and double-checked the pre-arranged seals while a squad of ANBU removed Sasuke from his hospital room under Tswanda-sama's direction. When the Uchiha boy arrived, it would begin. Behind him were several clan heads ready to witness part of the boy's punishment. Kakashi, the only non-clan leader, stood in for the extinct Uchiha clan as he possessed a Sharingan eye. Hayashi represented the Hyuga clan, and also was there to see the boy that had led to his nephew's terrible injuries. Tsum and Kurama were there for the Inuzuka clan, eager to stare down the Uchiha that had hurt their children. And the fabled Inoshikacho trio was there to round out the witnesses, Inoichi for the Yamanaka clan, Shikaku for the Nara clan, and Shikamaru's father, and Chuza for the Akimichi clan, and Chuji's father. The only major clan head not present was Shibi of the Aburame, as he was still off on clan business with his son, Shino. The air, already tense and heavy, grew stifling when the doors creaked open to admit the last Uchiha and his escorts. Although the boy was moving under his own power, he was clearly not in good health. He was paler than usual, his steps small and shuffling, and his shoulders were hunched. His eyes were still bound with bandages, and there were metal cuffs around his wrists and ankles, blocking his chakra and preventing him from casting any ninjutsu or genjutsu. Minato stood silently at the edge of the ceiling circles and watched intently as the four-masked ANBU positioned Sasuke at the center of the room, removed his shirt, and chained him to rings set in the floor. The ANBU withdrew to guard the door, and the small audience stood to attention, ready for anything. The Hokage tuned out all the distractions and started the procedure. First, he painted the last symbols necessary for the sealing directly on the boy's exposed skin. The boy twitched each time he applied the cool ink with the kanji brush, but otherwise had no reaction. He'd undergone a similar procedure when Kakashi had sealed the curse mark the first time. Minato was grateful that the boy wasn't putting up any struggle, and once the last character was completed, he stepped back and got to work. His hands snapped through several seals and he carefully wove and pushed his chakra through the stone floor and up into paper ofuda painted in kanji seals. There were 3 rings of kunai buried tipped down in the floor with paper seals tied to the rings at the end of the throwing knife handles surrounded the boy. As his chakra reached the symbols inked on the papers, the black marks peeled off the paper and drifted over the floor towards their target. The characters already painted on his skin shrank down and swirled over his skin towards their targets. The marks from the ofuda crawled up Sasuke's skin like a swarm of strange ants and circled around the trio of black, comma-like marks of the cursed seal of heaven. The seal symbols began to arrange themselves in a pair of circles around the marks, while a few sealing symbols slipped away, up the boy's neck and under the bandages that covered his eyes. The entire time Uchiha Sasuke was screaming in agony. And then it was over. The symbols were in place, the sealing was complete, and the boy was a limp heap on the floor. Minato approached the Uchiha and studied the seals at his neck to make sure that they had settled properly. Satisfied by the inner and outer ring and the prongs of that seal, he removed the bandage blindfold to examine the other sealing that he'd done. The other marks and symbols formed half circles at the edges of his eyes, running from near his tear ducts to the ends of his eyebrows. Uchiha Sasuke was powerful and he had proven himself untrustworthy, a very dangerous combination. So Minato put together a seal that would greatly reduce the flow of chakra possible to the boy's eyes. The last Uchiha would never activate his dreaded Sharingan eyes again unless the seals were removed. It is done, he sighed, and Tsunade-sama came forward to check the boy's vital signs. He'll need a few days more of rest, the Sannin declared after her quick exam, but after that he can be moved to a holding cell until his fate is decided. Very good. Minato rubbed tiredly at his eyes. Take him back to his room, he ordered, and the ANBU moved to comply. You sealed his eyes? Tsunade asked quietly as the boy was carried away. He greatly misused the gift of his blood, he frowned. He cannot be trusted to use it responsibly anymore. Maybe someday in the future he might redeem himself and earn the right to have his Kekkei Genkai restored, but that's a long way off from what I can see. She nodded silently and departed after the ANBU to tend to the boy. You do good work, Hokage-sama. Inazuka grinned ferally as she and her wolf-like dog, Kuramaru, left the room. Good night. Care to join us for a drink, Hokage-sama? Inoichi invited, speaking for his two friends. Not tonight, he smiled weakly. But thank you for the offer. The three men nodded and exited the room. Good evening, Hokage-sama, Hyuga Hayashi murmured with a formal bow. That was most impressive. Thank you, Minato replied tiredly. The clan elders have expressed an interest in guarding the Uchiha boy within the Hyuga clan compound should such measures be deemed necessary, Hayashi informed him. I'll keep that in mind, Hayashi-sama, the Hokage nodded. The Hyuga clan had bowed once more and withdrew without a word. Although he was tired and moments away from collapsing into bed in unconsciousness, Minato could guess at the reason for the Hyuga clan's interest in the Uchiha boy. It was rumored that the Sharingan was the result of a mutation of the Byakugan. Perhaps if he was socialized with the Hyuga, he could be ensnared in a marriage with them and his bloodline could strengthen theirs, or vice versa, or both. Somehow I get the feeling that the Hyuga elders' designs on Sasuke won't work out, Minato sighed as he finished clearing up the room and flashed back to his depressingly empty house. Sasuke is so fixated on vengeance, the likelihood of him ever looking at a girl, with any sort of interest while his brother still lives and breathes is slim to none. And who's to say if the two Kekkei Genkai are compatible at all? I've never heard of a Hyuga marrying an Uchiha, let alone having children together. The resulting children might have malformed eyes or no Kekkei Genkai at all. Minato scrubbed at his face with his hands and started to peel off his clothes so that he could climb into his bed. Little Hinata is the only Hyuga girl that I could see Sasuke even considering. They're close in age and she is of the main family, considered to be the best of their clan, but she's so timid, and I don't recall ever noticing if she had any interest in him at all, like most of her female classmates did during the academy. Nope, he shook his head and slunk wearily under the covers. I really don't think that Sasuke would go for Hinata, or any other Hyuga girl close enough in age to be appropriate, no matter how much the clan elders might wish it to be so. And then he slept. Naruto was deadly bored. The constant tiredness and weakness was almost gone, and his shoulder didn't really hurt anymore, unless he really started thinking about it, which made him think that the pain was more in his head than in his shoulder. It was really hard to stay in bed. He had energy now, and his restless nature was starting to get the better of him. His dad had visited him at least one more time, but he'd been asleep so it didn't really count. He'd gone to sleep one night, and in the morning there was a bag sitting on the end of his hospital bed that contained his favorite toad print pajamas and goofy black and white nightcap. It was a heck of a lot nicer than laying around in the dorky and embarrassing hospital gown, the evil kind that flashed your butt if you weren't careful. But aside from that, there was no sign that his dad had been in his room at all for a couple days. Things are getting back to normal, I guess, he sighed and fingered his nightcap. While he was a little disappointed at the slow shift back to life as usual, he was mostly relieved. Nice as it was for his dad to just show up for no reason and hang out with him, feed him dinner, read a book to him, it was just so indescribably weird too. His dad was the Hokage. It just seemed wrong for him to do things that a regular dad would do. He rolled onto his stomach and moaned into his thin hospital pillow. I'm so bored, Dadabayo. The pillow had no response to his whining. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? I'm supposed to be let out in a week, but it hasn't been a whole week yet. So bored, so bored, so bored. Ugh. Tired of trying to breathe through the pillow, he rolled back onto his back and stared up at the ceiling blankly. He toyed with the idea of using the call button to summon a nurse for a while, but decided against it. It would take forever for anyone to come check on him. He was the QB brat, and therefore was the lowest name on the priority list, and when some nurse did come, they probably wouldn't be very nice, especially when they found out that all he really needed was a little company. He just wasn't desperate enough, yet, to sit up and press the green button on the wall next to the bed. Aside from the unusually often visits from his dad, he hadn't had many people come see him. There had been Gaara on the first day, but after that the Sunanin had left Konoha with his siblings, so the red-headed demon vessel couldn't come visit him anymore. Kakashi-sensei had stopped in once between back-to-back S-class missions, but that had been brief. Iruka-sensei had managed to stop in twice even though he was just as busy as Kakashi-sensei. Sakura-chan had drifted into his room a couple times, but he could tell that her mind wasn't really focused on him at all. It was consumed with wondering about her Sasuke-kun. Tsunade-bachan stopped by at least once a day, but he really didn't count that as she was there to give him a health checkup. And he thought that there had been someone else, but whoever that other person was, they only hovered near the door and never came in. I'm not allowed to leave the hospital. Naruto screwed up his face in concentration for a moment. But a sly grin crept across his whisker-marked face. I can't get in trouble if I don't leave the hospital. No one said that I wasn't allowed to walk around inside. He sat straight up and pulled off his nightcap. I am a genius! Grinning like a madman, he dropped his night hat on the little table next to his bed and almost fell to the floor in his eagerness to get going. He pulled the little bathrobe off the hook near the door, yanked it on over his cartoon white-toed pajamas, and skittered out of the room. Pausing only to check the hall for nurses and medic needs, aka those who sought to thwart his semi-freedom, Naruto scampered off in search of something to do. The blonde boy bounced down the hallway, peering into rooms as he went. Those that were occupied held his interest longer than the empty ones, of course. The unfortunate ninja, once in a great while, a civilian, usually had at least one visitor or one vase of flowers. I don't have any flowers, he pouted after spying a room decked out with 5 bouquets of flowers. But I guess that's a girl thing, to give flowers, he mused thoughtfully. He'd never seen a guy give another guy flowers for any reason. Girls were the flower givers. And girls don't visit me. Sakura-chan's visits didn't count. Her mind was never in the room with them when she came by. Naruto continued his little tour of the hospital, only stopping to hide when he risked being caught by some hospital-affiliated adult. He avoided the busier hallways to prolong his amusement and avoid lectures. Oh, he hated those. But unfortunately his stamina hadn't really recovered, and after an hour his legs started to feel shaky. I need to sit down somewhere for a while, he decided. But where? Not my room, that's boring. Just as he was about ready to settle for a chair out in the hall to rest his legs, he found a room that contained someone he knew. Cautiously poking his head into the dimly lit room, he spied a Kimichi Chuji laid out in his hospital cot and hooked up to various medical machines. He looked awful. His old classmate looked emaciated, which was just plain wrong. Chuji had always been fat. It was a family trait. To see him so freakishly skinny was just plain wrong. Naro Shikamaru was also there, playing a game of shogi against himself beside the bed. The lazy genius, amazingly the first of his class to make Chunin, looked perfectly healthy, completely untouched by the Sasuke retrieval mission. His black hair was done up in its signature spiky ponytail, giving his head a vague resemblance to a pineapple, and his brown eyes were droopy, like he was bored out of his mind and ready to take a nap. Maybe he was. Playing shogi against yourself had to get really old after a while, especially for a genius like Shikamaru. Hey Shikamaru, Naruto whispered loudly. It probably didn't matter if he shouted or not. Chuji didn't look like he'd wake up for anything right now, but he oddly felt the need to be quiet. Can I play? Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at him. You want to play? Not really, Naruto shrugged and trudged into the room. But it's something to do. And beating my butt's got to be more fun than playing yourself, right? Doubtful, the Chunin snorted. It's troublesome, but I'll play a few rounds. The game board was rearranged so that they could both reach it, and the pieces were reset. Naruto got his butt thoroughly beaten. As he'd expected, he sucked at the game and had little patience for strategy. But he kept playing, if only to make the time pass faster. Shikamaru was kind enough to humor him, and a few rounds he knew the other boy was dragging his feet to try and give him some pathetically slim chance at winning. But Naruto never won once. Man, you really suck at this game, Shikamaru yawned. I know, Naruto groaned as his last piece was captured. The Chunin slumped tiredly back into his seat. If it wasn't so troublesome, I'd find a deck of cards so that maybe you could win a game or two. Hey, that a great idea. Naruto perked up and grinned. I'll go find some. He half sprung out of his seat, but paused and glanced over at the unnaturally skinny Chuji still out cold. Shikamaru, what happened to Chuji? He took all 3 of his family's secret pills, the other boy answered. Naruto frowned in deep concentration. But didn't you say that if he did that, he'd die? He should have, Shikamaru muttered. He almost did. He looked over sadly at his formerly chubby friend. If Tsunade-sama hadn't been here and studied my family's book of medicine, he would have died. Naruto winced. Well, when I get out of here, I'm smuggling in some potato chips for him. Heh, he'll love that, Shikamaru chuckled. Yeah. Naruto flashed his famous, or infamous, foxy grin and finished springing out of his seat. Now to find some playing cards. Mission firmly in mind, he rushed out of the room. and came within inches of colliding with Rock Lee. Rock Lee was more than Mato Guy's prize student, he was his miniature clone. Really, it was shocking that they weren't related at all. Lee idolized his beloved sensei so much that he strived to emulate him in every way possible. He dressed in the same green one-piece spandex suit with the bright orange leg warmers and the Heidi 8 worn as a belt, had the same black-haired bowl cut, and the same freakishly thick eyebrows. And in addition to simply looking like his sensei, Lee also copied his philosophies and attitudes. Naruto found it kinda creepy and excessive, but whatever made them happy. "Ah, Naruto-san," Lee exclaimed. "It is good to see you up and about. Your brilliant flames of youth will soon burn brightly once more." He gave Naruto an enthusiastic thumbs up and a toothy smile so wide and shiny that they sparkled with an audible ping. "Hey, yeah, sure," Naruto laughed weakly and scratched at the back of his head. He admired Lee's enthusiasm and drive. It took a lot of guts to strive to be a ninja when his chakra coils were so malformed that he would never be able to perform any genjutsu or ninjutsu, but even Naruto found him to be really, really weird. "Hey, bushy brows. Do you have any playing cards?" "I am sorry, Naruto-san, but no, I do not have any playing cards," Lee informed him with great regret. "But I shall try and find you some," the older boy resolved. "And if I cannot find you playing cards to use, I will run 1,000 laps around the hospital grounds before sunset. And if I cannot do that, I will." "Okay, thanks, bushy brows," Naruto called and hurried off down the hall. "I'll keep looking, too." And then he rushed around the corner, leaving the spandex-clad Genin swearing ever more elaborate self-induced punishments for failure to thin air. "Man, that guy's nuts," Naruto grinned as he ducked into the shadow of a cart to avoid being seen by a small pack of chatting nurses. "But I'm glad he's on my side." Once the coast was clear, Naruto ditched his hiding place and continued along, peering into rooms and keeping an eye out for a deck of cards. A few rooms down, he discovered Hyuga-Niji's room. The lights were lowered, like in Chuji's room, only he had no current visitors. He also didn't have as many flowers as Chuji, but then again Ino was on Chuji's team and her family owned a flower shop. He too was out cold and hooked up to a lot of machines. The Hyuga prodigy looked even paler than normal, and if Naruto didn't know any better he might have thought that the older boy was dead. The caged bird seal that Niji had shown him during their match in the Chunin exams was totally exposed, and the vibrant green X mark almost seemed to glow in the dark against his white skin. Unwilling to disturb the other boy, Naruto moved on without a word. A few minutes after that, he found Kiba. The Inuzuka was awake and reading some manga. Akamaru, his little white puppy, was curled up on a little pet-sized hospital bed thingy and half-swathed in bandages. While his little dog didn't look so good, Kiba actually didn't look bad at all. He easily looked 10 times better than Chuji or Niji. "Hey, Kiba!" Naruto called from the doorway. "Do you have any playing cards?" The brown-haired boy dropped his manga into his lap and flashed him a toothy, feral grin. "Naruto!" He waved a little. "Nah, I don't have any cards. What do you want them for?" "I got tired of Shikamaru kicking my butt in shogi. There's a chance that I can win at cards. Maybe I can ask my sister to bring me a deck later," Kiba shrugged. "So long as you let me play too." "Sure thing." Naruto grinned. "Hey, is Akamaru okay?" Kiba's face fell a little. "He'll be alright. He just needs rest." The Inuzuka grinned weakly. "Pretty soon we'll be bouncing off trees and practicing dynamic marking again." "Yeah." Naruto laughed and wrinkled his nose. "Just don't do that near me." "So long as you keep your wits about you and your senses alert, you shouldn't have to worry about getting hit with a little dog pee," Kiba snorted. "Whatever," Naruto grumbled. A startled squeak off to the side distracted Naruto from whatever else he was going to say, and he pulled his head out of Kiba's room to find a girl staring at him. She wore a shapeless, beige coat, wore her indigoish black hair in a short, almost boyish cut, and clutched a bunch of flowers to her chest. Her violet-white eyes were wide and her pale face was rapidly turning a deep shade of red. For a long moment Naruto couldn't connect a name with her face, and then the rusty wheels of his mind shifted a little and he remembered. "Oh, hey Hinata. You came to see Kiba too?" She stared at him open-mouthed for a little while longer before snapping out of her weird trance. The girl tore her eyes away from him and bowed her head to stare at the tiles under her feet. Her shoulders hunched, her toes seemed to turn inward, and overall it looked like she was shrinking in on herself and trying to disappear. "I'm sorry," she whispered so quietly that he could barely hear her. What W was the QQ question? Never mind, it was a stupid question. Naruto laughed a little bit and scratched at the back of his head. "Of course she's here to see Kiba, they're teammates." "Oh," she mumbled and shifted nervously. Silence fell in the hallway and Naruto got very uncomfortable. This kind of silence reminded him of his empty house. He hated it, and he'd even say something stupid just to make it stop. Are those flowers for Kiba? Why yes, she whispered. As some of them. Some of them? He frowned thoughtfully. The rest of the flowers are for Niji, right? I kind of forgot that Niji is her cousin. Oops. She nodded mutely. That's cool, he grinned widely. It's really nice of you to bring them both flowers. Nobody's brought me any. Her head jerked up in shock. Nobody? Nope, he shrugged. Sakura-san didn't bring you any? Nope. My name isn't Uchiha Sasuke, so why would she bother to get me flowers? Hinata looked a little upset to hear this, and dropped her eyes to the colorful bouquet of flowers clutched in her own hands. Her fingers fiddled anxiously, making the clear plastic wrap around the flowers crackle. Then she seemed to come to a decision and plucked a gaudy yellow flower from the bunch and stiffly held it out to him. For me? He blinked dumbly. Why yes. She almost choked on the word and her pupilless eyes couldn't seem to look directly at him. Her face, which had almost returned to its normal pale color, was once again a vibrant red. Naruto half raised his hand to take the flower, but hesitated. Really? She gave a jerky nod. He tentatively grasped the stem, took the flower from her, and sniffed at it, somehow not expecting it to be real. It smelled nice and quite real. He found himself grinning. Hey, thanks a lot, Hinata, he cried and took off towards his hospital room. I'll see you later. All hospital rooms came with one empty vase to hold flowers. Naruto had noticed that years ago, but never paid much mind to it as he never got any flowers to put in the vase. Now that he finally had a flower to decorate his room with, he was determined to take good care of it so that it would last a really long time. Who knew when he'd get another one? In his rush, he didn't bother to avoid the busier hallways or other people. He just focused on getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And of course this got him into trouble. A burly medic caught him by the back of his hospital-issue robe and brought him to a screeching halt. Before he caught up with what was going on, the medic was standing directly in front of him, blocking his way, and had taken the flower from him. The white-clad man possessed an imposing build and the angry, stern look on his face made it even worse. What room did you steal this from? The medic demanded, twitching the little flower at him. Naruto exploded. I didn't steal it, you jerk. Hinata gave it to me. Now give it back, Databeo. Don't lie, brat. The medic snapped. Who would bother to give you a flower? An invisible hand squeezed his insides. It was about the Kyuubi again. It always was. Really, who would give a flower to the Kyuubi brat? Who would dare? So of course the medic assumed that. What is going on here? Naruto blinked and found a hand grasping the medic by the wrist. He expected that the hand would be attached to Tsunade-ba-chan or Shizune-chan. Or maybe it would be Iruka-sensei or Kakashi-sensei that had come to his rescue. Heck, maybe it was even Ero-sennin, taking a break from peeping or bar-hopping. But no, it was the Yondaime Hokage, his dad, who stood there and pinned the medic down with his icy blue stare. Hokage-sama, the medic sputtered and seemed to shrink. The boy he was running through the halls and he had this flower, he must have taken it from one of the rooms. He says that I stole it, but I didn't, Naruto wailed. Hinata gave it to me. His dad removed the flower from the hand he had trapped and handed it down to Naruto without breaking his stare. Do not jump to such rude and insulting conclusions, sir, he warned. Then he finally turned away and looked down at Naruto. This is a hospital, Naruto. No running in the halls unless it's a dire, life-and-death emergency, okay? Yes, sir, Naruto mumbled and checked over the flower stem for damage. Sorry. His father flashed the medic a final stern look before nudging Naruto along down the hall. Naruto was more than happy to leave. He didn't like that medic and his flower needed water. So Hyuga Hinata gave you that flower? His dad asked when they arrived in his room. Yeah, Naruto nodded and plunked the yellow blossom into the little vase. I ran into her outside of Kiba's room and she gave it to me. That was very nice of her, he remarked. I hope you remembered to thank her. I did, Naruto huffed and crawled onto his hospital bed. After all the running and the excitement, his legs were feeling tired and wobbly again. His father sat down on the edge of the bed. What were you doing out of your room anyway? I was bored, Naruto sighed. There's nothing to do here by myself. He perked up a little as he recalled his mission. I was looking for playing cards so I could play with Shikamaru. I tried to play shogi with him, but I really suck at that game and he's really super awesome at it, so it got boring really fast. Could you find some playing cards for us to use, Gigi? Please? Sure, his father grinned. I can do that. You stay here and I'll be right back. Thanks, Naruto smiled and curled up under the thin hospital sheets. As his father left, he closed his eyes, just for a moment, while he waited. At some point after that he dozed off. When he opened his eyes again it was a few hours later, and there was a worn deck of cards sitting on the little bedside table. Tsunade-bachan's name was written on the box in black marker. I hope these cards are luckier than she is. I want to win against Shikamaru for a change. Shikamaru fingered a shogi tile as he idly studied the board. On one side of the board, he was playing with a set strategy. On the other, he was making things up as he went along while trying not to taint his moves with the fact that he knew exactly what the next move was going to be on the first side. But his mind wasn't entirely on the exercise. He prided himself on his ability to be able to predict how his classmates and friends would react or behave in certain situations. He was best at figuring out his own teammates, Ino and Shuji, as he spent the most time with them. But given enough time he could figure out just about anyone. That is, except for Uzumaki Naruto. The kid was a wild card, no doubt about it. Shikamaru could predict what he would do, but only to a point. Past that point, it was anyone's guess as to what he would do next. In battle especially he seemed able to make up battle strategies on the fly and make them work somehow. For instance, he never thought that Naruto could go toe-to-toe with Hyuga, let alone beat the prodigy, but he had. It had been a last-minute, skin-of-the-teeth victory, but still a victory. Naruto was an enigma. Ino was always gushing about how mysterious and enigmatic Sasuke was, but in Shikamaru's opinion, Naruto beat the Uchiha. Sure, he was bright and loud and visible, always laughing and smiling or yelling and gesturing, and he seemed like an open, easy-to-read book. But his unpredictable nature proved that assumption to be wrong. His gaudy outside hid whatever he was really thinking deep on the inside, if he was thinking at all. And then there was the question of just who was he? Sure, they all knew his name, Uzumaki Naruto, but that didn't explain his origins. There was no Uzumaki family. Naruto seemed to be the only one of his kind. No one had ever seen any parents or guardians, so it was assumed that he lived alone. And no one knew where he lived or how much money he had or anything else like that. No one even seemed to wonder about it. Shikamaru hated to admit it, but he hadn't ever wondered about it either. That is, until he picked up Naruto for the mission to drag Sasuke back to the village. Tsunade-sama had recommended him and given him Naruto's address. Figuring that it couldn't hurt to put him on the team, he had some useful skills, he'd gone along with it, and found his way to Naruto's door just as the sun was peeking over the horizon. To his surprise, Naruto lived in one of the nicest neighborhoods in Konoha. His house wasn't the biggest or fanciest on the street, but it was bigger and nicer than his own house by a good amount. Shikamaru almost thought that he was at the wrong address. But when he rang the bell, Naruto came to the door in his pajamas and stupid nightcap, half awake. There's no way that he lives there alone, Shikamaru mused. Even if he just inherited the place from dead relatives, he has to have a guardian of some sort staying there, to take care of the house if nothing else. So who is it? Some mysterious parent who never showed up at the academy? Or some foster? Unfortunately, it was an interesting puzzle, and he had trouble resisting puzzles. They were just so interesting and his mind just seemed drawn to them like a magnet. No matter how incredibly troublesome they turned out to be, he would always pick away at a puzzle until he had a solution. You're so troublesome, Naruto. Shikamaru made a face at his shogi board. Why do you have to be such a puzzle? As soon as he finished his breakfast the next morning, Naruto snagged the deck of cards and slipped out of his bed. He paused to admire the flower that Hinata gave him before he slipped out of the room, wary of any other nasty medics out to get him. Even though he only had 2 days left in the hospital before he was supposed to be released, there was no way he was laying around in his room. He was going to have some fun. That was really nice of Hinata to give me that flower yesterday. He dove under a gurney as some medics started down the hallway. She might be really weird and all, but she's so nice too. At least she didn't faint. Maybe she's getting healthier. That'd be cool. When the coast was clear, he resumed his trek towards Chuji's room. If Shikamaru wasn't there yet, he'd hit up Kiba's room. Either way, he'd get to use the cards that his dad had borrowed for him. He found the best of both worlds when he reached his destination. Not only was Shikamaru there, but Kiba was there too. Kiba had come in a wheelchair for a visit, and Akamaru lying in his lap. Hey! He skidded into the room, waving the pack of cards over his head. I found some cards. Took you long enough, Kiba snorted. Almost a whole day. I got tired and fell asleep and then it was kinda late, Naruto huffed. Otherwise I would have brought them by yesterday. Sure, Kiba smirked. Naruto made a face. Well, did your sister bring you any? Kiba squirmed. No, she was too busy and didn't stick around long enough for me to ask her. Ha! Naruto pushed a chair over to the other two boys at Chuji's bedside and settled into it. Let's play. Fine, Shikamaru sighed wearily. What do you want to play? Old maid, Kiba cried. Naruto blinked. How do you play that? You don't know how to play old maid? Kiba snorted. What rock do you live under? Shut up, Naruto snapped, flushing a little in angry embarrassment. I know how to play Go Fish. Old maid is so much better, Kiba sniffed. Well, tell me how to play and we'll play. Naruto scowled and pushed the cards into Shikamaru's hands. What card games do you know how to play, Naruto? Shikamaru asked as he dumped the cards out of their worn box. Just Go Fish, Naruto muttered. Erosenin said he was going to teach me how to play poker, but he hasn't yet, and I was more interested in learning new jutsu instead of cards. Really, what rock do you live under? Kiba frowned. Shut up. I don't live under a rock, Naruto whined. He's just teasing you, Naruto, Shikamaru groaned. Quit whining. He shuffled the cards and started to deal them out. Now here's how you play. Minato wanted to kill something, preferably the person currently in front of him. Danzu, the bane of the previous Hokage's existence, was still alive and spreading misery, only now he was the one stuck dealing with it. Why couldn't the old warhawk just lie down and die of old age already? Danzu had been a strong shinobi in his prime, but that time was long past. A hard career in Anbu had left him physically maimed and disfigured and forced him to retire from active service. Most of his head was swathed in bandages to hide the hideous burn scars he'd suffered. He had lost part of his leg, which left him dependent on a ken to walk, and part of his arm, which he left in a sling. He was small and elderly and mean and conniving. He'd once been in charge of all of Anbu, held a seat on the council, and held designs on the office of Hokage. But as a result of various little intrigues and his disobedience during the advance of the Kyuubi, Minato had shuffled him to a lesser council seat and left him in charge of Anbu's root division, which he later disbanded. He would have gotten rid of Danzu completely if he could, but the wily old man had connections that he just couldn't quite overcome. You're dragging your feet on this, Namikaze, Danzu growled. I'd have made up my mind about the Uchiha on day one. I'm sure that you would, Danzu-san, Minato replied, trying not to growl. However, I haven't received all the reports yet. Some of the genin involved haven't recovered enough to give their accounts yet. Have you gotten the Uzumaki's report yet? Danzu asked. I've heard that he's recovered well from his injuries, runs around the hospital like a little boy on a sugar high. It took some effort for Minato to maintain a mildly pleasant expression. I was planning on taking Uzumaki Naruto's report this afternoon, and perhaps Inuzuka Kiba's as well if the boy is up to it, he replied tightly. The old man scowled. You coddled that boy too much, Namikaze. With the Kyuubi's power at his disposal, he could be a great asset to the village. Give me a few months with him and I'll turn him from a pathetic little clown into something valuable. No, Minato responded icily. It was no the last time you asked, and it will be no the next time you ask. Are you sure that you can continue to handle the boy properly? Danzu asked with clear skepticism. Now that he is an official ninja, able to mold chakra and put into life and death decisions, do you believe you've taught him enough to keep the beast within him under control? He's not some cute little thing that you can keep as a pet anymore, Namikaze. Minato wanted to slug him for that last comment. I have never thought of Naruto as a pet, he hissed. Oh, that's right, you treat him as the son that you never had, Danzu sneered. Right. Clenching his teeth, Minato refused to go for the bait. From the moment of his birth, from the moment that Minato had decided to make him the Jinchuriki, he had shrouded Naruto's existence in a veil of lies. It was the only way to protect his son from the myriad of enemies he would have, both foreign and domestic. When he presented Naruto to the council as the jailer of the Kyuubi no Yoko, he'd introduced him as an orphan whose mother had died giving birth to him. While the part about his mother had been true, the rest was a lie. Had they known that he was really Naruto's father, they would have put up a fight over letting him keep the boy. They would fear that he would be biased towards the boy, that it would a conflict of interest. They would fear that he would act like an indulgent father instead of the Hokage with the child that carried the Kyuubi in his guts. And had the world at large known that he, the Yondaime Hokage, had a son, any who held a grudge against him would strike out at him through his child. The Iwanin especially hated him, and they held grudges for ages. If they knew about Naruto, they wouldn't rest until they'd stolen him away or killed him. And with all the internal worries about keeping Naruto safe from his own side, he would do just about anything to minimize his foreign enemies. So Minato, as the Hokage, took in the Jinchuriki that he'd helped create, as it was his responsibility, and that had been the end of it. Things would have worked out a great deal smoother, though, if Naruto didn't look like his miniature clone. When he'd been a baby, he could pass off the similarities, blonde hair and blue eyes, as superficial and coincidental. But with each passing year, as his son grew and developed, the resemblance grew stronger and stronger. The only feature that really set them apart was Naruto's whisker marks, and those weren't genetic, they were a sign of the fox demon residing inside of him. Some of the council members had to suspect by now. They probably thought that Naruto was some illegitimate son that Minato had managed to cook up just in time. At this point, it didn't seem to be a problem. No one had ever called him on it or accused him of it. But now Danza seemed poised to change all that. If you have no business to discuss, please get out of my office, Danzu, Minato frowned. The old man peered shrewdly at him with his one visible eye. I'll stop by tomorrow, he grumbled finally. I am most interested to hear of the Uzumaki's increased abilities, and I'm sure the rest of the council will too. Then Danza stiffly rose from his chair before the Hokage's desk and hobbled from the room without a farewell or bow of any kind. Minato seethed. While he was immensely glad that the old man was finally gone from his office, he couldn't entirely enjoy the now Danza-free atmosphere. The conniving elder was just so irritating, and worse, he was very dangerous. Now I have to get Naruto's report, he sighed wearily. I've been dragging my feet long enough, but now there's no wiggle room left at all. Danza will go around throwing hints at the other council members about the information that I'm about to collect, and they'll be demanding to hear it at the next meeting. Tense and on edge, he abandoned his office after informing his secretary that he would be at the hospital if anyone needed him, and that he was not to be disturbed unless it was necessary. Leaping over the rooftops, he took a zigzagging course to try and burn off some of his frustration before he arrived. It wouldn't do if he interviewed Naruto while in a bad mood. He didn't want to confuse the boy. When he arrived at Naruto's room, it was empty. Rubbing a hand over his face, he trudged from the room and headed for Akimichi Chuji's room. Naruto had wanted the playing cards so that he could play with Naruto Shikamaru, and the young Chunin would most likely be found in his teammate's room. Sure enough, once he reached the Akimichi's room, Naruto was there, laying on the foot of Chuji's bed, playing cards in his hospital robe and toad pajamas. Naruto Shikamaru was lazily clutching his own hand and looking about ready to lay his head down for a nap. Chuji was surprisingly conscious and propped up on pillows with his own set of cards held loosely in his hands. And Inuzuka Kiba was also present, still in his hospital gown, and slightly hunched over in a chair next to Shikamaru's. His puppy was dozing in the seat of a nearby wheelchair. Looking over the scene, Minato was reminded of the occasional card game he'd get sucked into with other jounin when he was a teenager. It made him smile and brushed away his lingering bad mood. He could wait until the card games petered out before he started asking Naruto and Kiba unpleasant questions about the mission that had landed them in the hospital. Having fun, boys? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. All four boys flinched in surprise and spun to gape at him. Hokage-sama, Shikamaru blinked, the first to recover his voice. Is something wrong? No. Do you need Shikamaru for a mission? Chuji asked feebly, barely able to lift his head off the pillows that supported him. No, not yet. Are we in trouble for playing cards? Kiba squeaked. Minato frowned slightly. You're not playing for money, are you? No. They all sputtered. Then no, you're not in trouble. Naruto eyed him curiously. Do you want to play? We're playing Old Maid. He glanced over at the other three boys curiously. Would it bother you if I joined you? The three other boys started in surprise and glanced at each other in silent communication. Naruto stared back at him in surprise, like he hadn't expected Minato to be interested in the invitation. Minato just waited for the other boys to make up their minds. All right, Shikamaru nodded, gathered up all the cards, and reshuffled them to start a fresh game. Minato retrieved a chair and settled it next to Kiba's. Settling himself comfortably, he accepted his hand of cards and waited for the game to get going. Even though it was just a simple children's game, he found himself looking forward to it more than he had the last few games of poker he'd been yanked into back in the day. A few rounds later, Minato sighed. You boys are allowed to talk in front of me, you know. Naruto wrinkled his nose and thought. So how's your day been? You just had to ask that, didn't you? He sighed and studied his cards. Oh, nothing much out of the ordinary. Danzu stopped by and made a pest of himself for a while. Danzu? Kiba sniffed curiously. Who's that? Danzu, Naruto muttered, closing his eyes in contemplation. Hey! He leaned forward eagerly. Isn't he the mummy man? The mummy man? Chuji blinked slowly. The corner of Minato's mouth twitched. Yes, Naruto, he's the mummy man. EW, I hate that guy. Naruto snorted. He's such a jerk, and he's so old too. How's he such a jerk? Kiba asked. He's really nasty and disrespectful, Naruto scowled and pointed over at Minato. He's never, ever called him Hokage or Hokage-sama or anything like that, it's just Namikaze, no honorific or anything. Like you're any better, Kiba smirked. Calling him Hokage-jiji to his face all the time. Hey, I mean it in a good way. Naruto protested. Mummy man never means anything in a good way. He's just a nasty, shriveled old guy with a cane that's all wrapped up in bandages. He pouted over at Minato. Why don't you just fire him, Gigi? I would if I could, Naruto. Minato sighed and drew a card from his son's hand. But Danzu is cunning. He's cultivated friendships and connections with powerful people, just enough that if I were to strip him of everything, he'd cause such trouble that it could be years before I get everything running smoothly. The best I can do is stuff him in a position where he can do the least damage. Naruto made a face and picked a card off Kiba. Well, that sucks. Tell me about it, Minato replied with a wry smile. Is there any reason why he's so nasty, Hokage-sama? Chuji asked quietly as Shikamaru retrieved a card from Minato's hand for him. Danzu's wanted to be Hokage since before Sandaime-sama was chosen for the position, Minato answered. Wow, this dude's seriously old, Kiba muttered. He never thought highly of how Sandaime-sama ran things, the Hokage continued, ignoring Kiba's comment. And when the Sandaime was getting ready to retire, Danzu put himself up for consideration and threw some support behind Orochimaru to be the Yondaime. Okay, this guy sounds like bad news, Chuji sighed. I mean, if he liked Orochimaru. Danzu favors more aggressive foreign policy among other things, Minato frowned. Anyway, imagine how upset he was when I, a young man barely in my 20s, was selected to be the next Hokage. He shook his head. To this day, he still refuses to willingly recognize me as the Yondaime. And so long as he lives, I think he'll still dream of getting to be Hokage. Even though he's ugly, missing part of his arm and leg, and older than dirt. Naruto chimed in disgustedly. My advice to you, he looked at each boy in turn, eyeing Naruto last and longest, is to steer clear of him, he'll only bring you trouble and make my life harder. Yes, Hokage-sama, the boys agreed in ragged unison, and Naruto said GG of course. He nodded in satisfaction and was about to put his full focus back on the cards in his hand when another body skidded into the room, one Yamanaka Ino. Hey Chuji. Shika-kun. Guess who's he, Hokage-sama. Minato slowly turned around in his chair to find the blonde Kunoichi gaping at him. Her platinum blonde hair was still short from when she'd impulsively hacked it off during her match in the Forest of Death against Haruno Sakura and done up in a bun. She was dressed in her purple ninja outfit, so she had either been training or was going to go train after her hospital visit. Recovering herself, Ino straightened up and brushed her long bangs out of her eyes. Hokage-sama, she bowed slightly. He nodded politely to her. Ino-san. Here to visit your teammates? Before she could answer, her father, Inoichi, swept into the room behind her. Ino, you shouldn't run like that in the hospital. Hey, Hokage-sama, he bowed and then leaned back out the door. Chuza, Shikaku, the Hokage's here. Akimichi Chuza trundled into the room next. Hokage-sama, he bowed and slipped around to the far side of his son's bed. Hokage-sama, Nara Shikaku muttered as he too slunk into the room. A party, eh? He grumbled, glancing around at the clump of people. So troublesome. Hey Oyaji, Shikamaru waved lazily. Hiding from mom again? Maybe, Shikaku grumbled noncommittally. What brings you here, Hokage-sama? He's hiding from the mummy man, Naruto informed them gravely. Inoichi blinked. Who? Danzu, Minato replied. Oh. Inoichi let out a snort of laughter. Mummy man, that's pretty good. Indeed, Chuza agreed. What are you boys playing? Old maid, Kiba announced. That's such a baby game. Ino sniffed. Whose idea was that? I suggested it, but Naruto really wanted to play it, Kiba answered, somewhat embarrassed. He didn't even know how to play. You didn't know how to play, old maid? Ino sputtered incredulously. What rock have you been living under your whole life? I don't live under a rock, Naruto shouted, dropping his cards and hopping to his feet on the end of Chuji's bed, absolutely irate. Minato sighed, put down his cards, and stood up. He'd hoped to be able to play through a full game, but it looked like he would have to see if he could play later. With the Ino Shikacho adults on the scene and Naruto acting up, he had an excuse to carry the boy off for a while. There was no putting it off anymore. Of course you don't live under a rock, Naruto, he stated tiredly and plucked the boy off the bed and tossed him over his shoulder. Ah. Put me down, Dadabayo. Naruto whined and pounded his little fists against Minato's back. Put me down, GG. Nope, he gripped the boy's legs firmly to avoid getting kicked. I'm kidnapping you, alright? No. Naruto moaned and tried to heave himself over the Hokage's shoulder so that he could flee. Too bad, Minato grinned. He nodded to the staring audience. Have a nice afternoon. I'll send him back when I'm done with him. Save me, Shikamaru! Naruto pleaded, but to no avail. Minato escaped from the room without any interference, to Naruto's dismay. Being the Hokage had its perks. Not a single person questioned him as he walked down the hall with his son hung over his shoulder moaning how unfair life was. But his unhindered escape also meant that he would make it back to the privacy of Naruto's hospital room that much faster, and then he would have to ask his son about his unhappy adventure that much sooner. Today just plain sucks. Naruto huffed and angrily crossed his arms over his chest when his dad dumped him on his hospital bed. Being carried around like a sack of potatoes was fun when he was 2, but it wasn't all that fun now that he was 12. And his dad just had to do it in a public place, in front of his friends and some of their dads. What was that for? Naruto pouted furiously. I need to talk to you, and that seemed the fastest way to get you out of there. His father slid shut the door and shrugged. With other visitors to distract them, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. What do you need to talk to me about? Naruto asked warily. His dad didn't immediately answer. Instead, he pulled a small notebook and pencil out of his pocket and settled down on the chair that he'd permanently parked next to the bed. He looked calm and serious, very Hokage-like. Oh. I wish that I didn't have to ask, but I've put this off long enough, he sighed. Naruto, I need to know what happened after Shikamaru-sen fell back to engage Taiguya up to when Rock Lee took over the battle with Kimimaro, and your pursuit and fight with Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto shivered and hugged himself. He didn't want to remember. It was so awful. And he was just starting to really feel normal again. But after he told his dad, the Hokage, about it, he could forget it and never speak of it again. Okay. Naruto took a few deep breaths and got started. So Shikamaru sends me on alone after this creepy Kimimaro guy and... Shikamaru leaned back in his chair and thought hard. His dad was napping, Ino and her dad and Chuji's dad were chatting with Chuji, and Kiba had shuffled back to the wheelchair he'd rode in on and had Akamaru back in his lap. But he tuned it all out in favor of thinking about Naruto and the Hokage. It was absolutely bizarre that the Hokage would stop by in person at all, and for no reason other than he seemed to feel like it. That alone was enough to get him thinking. Then Naruto goes and invites him to join their game. That didn't seem too unusual, considering Naruto's total lack of respect, or just lack of proper respect, for authority figures. But the fact that the Hokage accepted, even seemed excited to play with them, kids, Genin and a Chunin, didn't quite seem to fit. Then there was the way that the two interacted. They spoke easily, like they talked together all the time, although, considering Naruto's penchant for pranks back in the academy, maybe they did talk all the time. And when the Hokage mentioned some village official that he didn't like, Naruto knew who he was talking about and had even tacked on a mildly insulting nickname, the Mummy Man. When would Naruto have ever met this Danza character to give him such a moniker? And to top it off, there was the way that the Hokage had left with Naruto. He tossed the kid over his shoulder like a piece of luggage. It was like watching a dad mess with his kid. Naruto lives in a nice house in a nice neighborhood. He and the Hokage get along like family. And they look freakishly alike. Shikamaru frowned. If Naruto is related to the Hokage, why don't any of us know about it? Why isn't Naruto yelling it from the rooftops? He certainly won't stop boasting about how he's going to be Hokage someday, so why not add, just like my dad? Damn it, Naruto. Everything I come up with leads to more questions. Troublesome kid. When Naruto hit the Valley of the End in his story, he couldn't look at his dad anymore. He dropped his eyes to the tile floor and recounted the events as clearly and calmly as possible. If he didn't, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get through the whole thing. He also was scared. He'd drawn on a lot of the Kyuubi's chakra, more than he ever had before. The chakra had done something that it hadn't done before. It made him worry that he would be in trouble. Naruto went over everything that happened. He related what Sasuke said to him. He talked about getting run through the shoulder by the Chidori, getting his neck broken, Sasuke's freakish form granted by the second level of his curse seal, and the final clash in front of the waterfall. And then when he hit the end, he closed his eyes and waited. His father's callous hands slid under his arms and lifted him off the bed and plopped him on his lap. Naruto blinked, suddenly staring at the dull green of his dad's flak jacket, and felt arms hugging him. Something shivered inside him, then broke. He choked, he sobbed, and he couldn't stop. Naruto, his dad whispered gently. Sure, it's over now, sure. Daddy, Naruto choked, Sasuke, he tried to kill me. And then he said that we were friends. I know. Why? He sobbed, clutching at the edges of his father's Hokage coat. His dad said nothing, just held onto him and let him cry and get tears and snot and spit all over. Eventually Naruto wore himself out, and quieted down to the occasional hitched breath or watery sniff. He felt sick, his stomach ached and his head throbbed and he could barely breathe through the tears and snot. His father just held him and rubbed his back and said nothing. The sound of the door scraping open broke the peace of the room and Naruto peered blearily over his shoulder to see a startled nurse standing there. She was holding a lunch tray and had probably been the one to draw the short straw at the nurse's station to bring the Kyuubi brat his lunch. But to see the Hokage there, that she was clearly not expecting. Hokage-sama. She sputtered and half bowed. I didn't expect to see you here. Hello, he nodded politely to the gray-haired woman. You can leave that on the table. The nurse immediately obeyed and started to leave, but hesitated at the doorway. Is everything all right with him? The forced concern in her voice was painfully obvious. I can handle it, his dad assured the woman and waved her away. When the door clicked shut, Naruto sagged against his father's chest. Can I go home now? He whimpered. I'll see if I can pick you up tonight, his dad answered. You're doing so much better, I can't imagine that Tsunade-sama will say no. Okay. He felt better knowing that his hospital stay was finally drawing to an end. Do I have to eat that? He muttered, glancing distastefully at the lunch tray across the room. I'm not really hungry right now. You don't have to eat it right away, but I'd like you to eat at least half of it before you go running off to cause chaos in the halls. Can you do that for me? Naruto wrinkled his nose. I guess. Good, he grinned. Do you feel a bit better now? Yeah, Naruto shrugged. Would it be alright if I left for a while? I need to interview Kiba today too. Naruto swallowed a sigh and nodded, You sure? His father asked. Yep. He wormed out of his dad's arms and crawled back onto the hospital bed and laid down, his back towards his father. My head kinda hurts, I think I'll take a nap. Alright. His father stood up and patted his back. I'll see you tonight. Bye, Naruto waved. There was the sound of the door opening and closing and then he was alone. Naruto lay on his side for a while, staring blankly at the yellow flower that Hinata had given him the day before. After a while he sat up and grabbed the lunch tray that the nurse had brought and half-heartedly picked at it. But he really just wasn't hungry. Why can't it be tonight already? Orochimaru was very displeased. He'd sacrificed a great deal, Jirabu, Kidomaru, Taiyuya, Sakan and Yukon, and Kimimaro, to acquire Uchiha Sasuke. And it had all been for nothing. The Sharingan had almost been his. That most precious Kekkei Genkai, the ability to see through genjutsu like glass, to predict the moves of his opponent before they made them, to be able to copy any jutsu just by seeing it performed once. That power which he coveted most of all was torn back out of his grasp by a bunch of foolish leaf genin. Konoha always got in the way of his ambitions. First it was Sarutobi-sensei's denial of his great talent by handing the title of Hokage onto Jiraiya's student instead of him. Then there was his expulsion from the village due to a few little experiments that he'd been quietly conducting. And now the beautiful and recently endangered Sharingan was kept from his hands. He hadn't needed Sasuke's body immediately. His darling Kabuto had been able to repair most of the damage that Minato had done to him during the failed Sand Sound invasion of Konoha. But the sooner he could woo his desired vessel to his side, the better. And after the horrible disappointment of his little strike at his former home, it would have been nice to have a new apprentice that would one day house his soul and prolong his life. The Sannin critically studied his bandaged arms with a faint scowl. Minato had used his devastating speed to try and slay his foe, but only succeeded in maiming his arms. Kabuto had used his medical genius to save them, but they were covered in scars and didn't function as well as they once had. And with Tsunade's refusal to use her greater medical skill to restore him, and Sasuke out of reach for the moment, he only had one option left. Kabuto, he purred in his low, silky voice. Go through the test subjects and find me a suitable replacement vessel, would you? Of course, Orochimaru-dano. Kabuto shoved his round glasses further up the bridge of his nose, and departed. Orochimaru smiled and ran his long tongue over his lips in anticipation. In the long run, it didn't matter that his invasion plans had gone awry and that he'd lost a good many ninja who joined his cause. It didn't matter that his hidden village was little more than a series of holes in the ground in various small countries that he bounced between to avoid being rooted out by other stronger ninja groups. With his kenjutsu to move his soul from body to body, he had all the time in the world to get it right. Naruto wasn't terribly surprised when it was Kakashi-sensei who showed up to take him home. He was a little disappointed. His dad had been showing up so often that maybe he could pull it off one more time. But it seemed that Hokage business was running late again, like always, so it was one of his teachers to the rescue. You look much better, Naruto, Kakashi smiled, or at least it looked like he was smiling. It was hard to tell sometimes with the mask he always wore over most of his face. Thanks, Naruto sighed as he yanked a black t-shirt over his head. I feel a lot better. They could have let me out a couple days ago. I'm sure that they were just being careful. His teacher shrugged and pulled out his infamous orange book. Whatever, he snorted and fastened his Zora sandals. Now I can get back to training. Kakashi distractedly patted his head. In a few days. Huh! Naruto scrunched up his face in comical confusion as he pulled his backpack, which contained his worn pajamas and his torn-up ninja clothes, over his shoulder. You may be released from the hospital, but you haven't been cleared for strenuous activity yet. Kakashi peered over his book with his one visible eye. And with your training style, even light training is strenuous. Wah! Naruto wailed and grasped at his hair. How can I ever get to be Hokage if I can't train? Relax, Kakashi sighed. I'm sure that it'll only be a few days, and you'll be out of the hospital. I'm going to be so bored, Naruto moaned and trudged over to retrieve his flower from the vase. Cheer up, think of it as a vacation. Kakashi smiled. I wouldn't mind getting some time off. I just got back from a mission and I'll probably leave tomorrow morning on another. Naruto sagged. I don't suppose that I could go with you. Nope. His sensei glanced up from his book curiously. Who gave you that flower? Hinata. Naruto walked over to the door of his room. You don't have to walk me home. I know the way. It's no trouble. Kakashi shoved the door open and waved Naruto on ahead. So Hyuga Hinata gave you a flower, eh? Yeah, so what? Naruto squinted suspiciously at his teacher. He made walking me home a mission, didn't he? No, I'm doing this for free. Now what do you think of this girl? Naruto blinked. Who? Kakashi shook his head and sighed. Hinata, the girl we were just talking about. What about her? What do you think about her? She's really dark and timid and weird but kinda nice. Naruto squinted at the setting sun as they walked out the front doors of the hospital. Oh? Naruto frowned warily at Kakashi's interested tone. What? How is she nice? She's just a nice person, Naruto shrugged. But what makes you say that? Kakashi pressed. She was nice to me. Naruto stopped walking and scowled at his teacher. Kakashi-sensei, what's with all the weird? Oh, hello Hinata, Kakashi greeted, looking off to the side and tucking his dirty book under one arm. Good evening. Naruto turned and found that Hinata was standing there, half hidden by a telephone pole and looking very surprised to be noticed. Kakashi-sensei, she half bowed. And then Naruto-kun. Gee, good evening. Hi Hinata! Naruto cried. What are you doing? She timidly shrank into the shadow of the pole. WWLIW was out F for a W walk and. Frustrated at her barely audible voice and eager to hear what she had to say, he scampered right up to her face and cupped his ear to hear her better. What was that? The girl let out a startled squeak and stumbled backwards, her pale face flushing a fierce red. Hey, are you okay? He reached out and pressed his hand against her forehead to check for a fever. Your face is really red. Do you have a fever? Aye. Her face was, if possible, getting even redder and she started to sway on her feet. Hey, Hinata! Are you okay, Urk? Naruto abruptly found himself yanked backwards by his shirt collar. Why don't you run along home, Hinata? Kakashi cheerfully suggested. It's getting late. The red-faced girl grasped the offered escape and bolted without another word. What was that for? Naruto howled and pulled his shirt free. Why'd you send her away? Does she always react that way when you talk? Kakashi asked, an odd light in his eye. Yeah, Naruto scowled. Not that we talk much. Interesting. Kakashi tapped his masked chin thoughtfully before removing the orange book from under his arm and holding it out to Naruto. Don't let your dad catch with this, and if he does, I didn't give to you, but you're going to need it. Naruto flinched away from the orange cover like it was diseased. Kaya! Keep your porn to yourself, sensei. I'm 12, I don't need it. Suit yourself, Kakashi sighed and opened the book to where he'd left off. If you ever want to borrow it, come see me. Blee! Naruto shuddered and stalked off towards his house. You're such a pervert, sensei. Kakashi just chuckled at him. Then he giggled at some particularly juicy part of his book. Naruto shivered, scowled, and marched a bit faster. Why me? Naruto sighed. Kakashi-sensei's such a perv, reading that stuff in front of us like that, and Ero Sennin's even worse, he writes that stuff. At least Dad's not really into that. Just as he and his teacher reached the entrance to his neighborhood, they came across Sakura heading home. She'd apparently been to the library as her arms were overloaded with thick, heavy books. Naruto perked up at the sight of his pink-haired kunoichi teammate, but didn't expect much. She'd been so spacey lately, and with her precious Sasuke-kun's fate still undetermined, her mind was always stuck on him and not Naruto. Sakura-chan! He cried and waved enthusiastically. Sakura-chan, hi! She paused in her labored shuffle and looked in Naruto's direction. Naruto? They let you out? Uh-huh. He skittered up to her and studied the pile of books in her arms. The long, complicated titles made his head hurt just looking at them. What's with all this? I needed to study, she informed him. Hi, Kakashi-sensei. She would have waved at the teacher, but her hands were very full. Good evening, Sakura, Kakashi waved, his eye still on his book. Study for what? Naruto frowned. Then he felt a surge of panic. Don't tell me that we have a test coming up. No, she snorted. Tsunade Shurso took me on as an apprentice. I'm studying to be a medic like her. Oh, that's so cool. Naruto gushed. You're so smart. You'll do awesome, Sakura-chan. Thanks, she grunted and shifted the books she was holding a little. I have to get this stuff home before my arms fall off. The girl started to walk off. See you later, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye, Sakura-chan. Naruto waved energetically at her retreating form. Bye, Kakashi added. And then she was gone. Naruto bounced with excitement as he continued his trek home. That's so cool that Tsunade-bachan's going to teach Sakura-chan medic stuff. Our team's going to be so much more awesome now. In time, yes, Kakashi agreed. But it will take a lot of study and practice for her training to start paying off. Being a medical ninja is one of the most demanding specialties, especially in the area of knowledge. The genin deflated slightly. Oh. Another damper on his spirits was Sasuke. Without him, their team was one man short. And now that Sakura was going to undergo special medic training, the team was depleted further. With Kakashi in high demand for A and S-class missions that were too dangerous for genin to tag along on, Naruto was rather alone. Hey, sensei, Naruto frowned as they drew near his front door. When I'm cleared to go on missions again, what'll I do? What do you mean? Kakashi asked and opened the door for him. Naruto yanked off his sandals and walked inside, depositing his shoes on the little shelf by the door. Well, Sakura-chan's probably going to be busy a lot, and you're busy a lot, and Sasuke's in trouble. Jiraiya-sama will work with you when I can't, Kakashi answered as he removed his own sandals. And you'll probably be tacked onto some of your friends' teams as a substitute or extra member for missions. He closed the door and headed for the kitchen, his nose still in his book. As far as the next Chunin exams go, if you sign up for them and Sakura doesn't, you'll probably be lumped with Ino and Chuji if he's recovered in time. The next Chunin exams? Naruto frowned, ditching his bag at the foot of the upstairs with the intent of carrying it up to his room later, and then chasing after his teacher. I hadn't thought that far ahead. The Chunin exams are held every 6 months or so, remember? With all the chaos recently with the Sand Sound incident, the next exam was pushed back a few months, and if I remember right, the Land of Lightning is hosting the next exam. Kakashi set aside his book briefly to dig around in the fridge. Looks like you need to go shopping, there isn't much in here. Naruto rolled his eyes and climbed on a counter to peer into the cabinets for instant ramen cups. Selecting a few chicken and beef cups, he started to prepare them. As he was filling the first cup with water, he wondered, Kakashi-sensei, do I have to sign up for the next exam? Kakashi pulled his head out of the fridge. Why wouldn't you want to? You did so well last time. It just doesn't feel right, Naruto pouted as he waited for the water to boil. To enter with some other team. Naruto, it's very rare for a ninja to stay with their starting genin team throughout the entirety of their career. Unfortunately, teams don't last forever. But at least you have a good chance of working with people you know and get along with. Kakashi patted him on the head as he exited the kitchen with some leftover takeout. Think of it as broadening your horizons. With different teams, the variety of missions you go on will increase. I guess, Naruto shrugged and stirred up his instant ramen. Don't worry about it now, Kakashi called from another room, and there was the faint sound of the TV turning on. You have time. Enjoy your days off. Naruto just sighed and devoured his instant ramen dinner. I want to be a chunin and all, but I don't want to do it without Sakura-chan and Sasuke team. Shikamaru laid back on the bench on top of the roof near the middle of town, his favorite cloud-watching spot, and sighed. Any day now he expected to be summoned for a new mission. The burn on his forearm was completely healed and his broken pinky was only a bit stiff. He intended to take advantage of his remaining free time. It was bound to run out soon, but unfortunately his mind was bothered with troublesome thoughts. This is such a drag. I can't even enjoy the clouds today. How troublesome. He ran a hand over the drab green canvas of his armored vest, still not used to wearing the new mark of rank, and sighed again. Naruto really is the #1 unpredictable ninja. At first glance you'd think that he's an open book. But he's way more complex than that. Earlier in the day, when he'd been training with his father, he'd casually asked about his classmate. He wanted his father's opinion and hoped to pry loose some information that would explain some things. The response he got was interesting. Hey Oyaji, you know Naruto, right? I know of him. Do you know anything of his family? I never remembered meeting any of his relatives. Can't say that I do. Why the interest? When I went to recruit Naruto for the mission, I was rather surprised to see where he lived, and it made me realize that I really don't know much about him outside of the academy. Well, I can't help you. That boy is so troublesome. And that had been the end of it. Shikamaru had tried to edge in a few more questions, but his father had ended their practice and ditched him without answering. His father's opinion had been expected. Nara men tended to find just about anything or anyone troublesome to some degree, but it was his father's demeanor during their conversation that had him thinking. He was nervous. He didn't want to talk about Naruto at all. Oyaji knows a lot more than he told me, I'm sure of it. So why not tell me? I'm not a little kid anymore. After that, his mother had nagged him to do errands for her. While he was out and about, he casually asked around about his old classmate. Surprisingly, everybody seemed to know of him, and their reactions had been even more interesting than his dad's. In general, all the reactions were negative. Some people got strange looks on their face, some kind of anger, or fear, or hate, or some ugly mixture of the three. Most refused to speak of him. The few who did said some rather odd things. Steer clear of that one. He'll bring you nothing but trouble. Why would you ever want to know about that boy? Don't you be asking questions about that disgrace. That wretched monster. That last comment had been from the kindly bookstore owner, who had always seemed calm and kind when he'd picked up things for his mother before. He'd never seen the man rage like that in the past. And before he could finish his sentence, his wife shut him up, looking terrified, whispering, "Dear, we can't speak of that, it's forbidden." His intent in asking around about the energetic young shinobi had been to try and uncover evidence that supported his strong suspicion that Naruto was the hidden son of the Hokage. But it seemed that he'd stumbled over some mysterious and rather sinister secret concerning his comrade, something all the adults appeared to know. It was more than a little disturbing. They all seemed afraid and angry. I can't think of anything that Naruto could have done to give him such a reputation. Not unless one of his pranks killed someone, but I'd have heard of that. What about him is so dangerous that it's forbidden to speak of it? The Nara boy groaned in frustration. Nothing made sense. The way everyone acted, it was like he was someone terrible and dangerous. Yet Naruto seemed like any other kid back in the academy. If he was really so dangerous, he should have been locked up, but he walked around the village like any other boy. Sorting through his memories in an attempt to find anything to explain the villagers' strange attitude, something Naruto had said once came back to him. It had been the day before the final round of the Chunin exams, when they'd interrupted Gaara's attempt to murder Rock Lee in the hospital. Shikamaru hadn't thought much of it at the time, as his mind was fully focused on preserving Lee's life while not getting himself and Naruto killed. Naruto had been his usual loud, hot-headed, idiot self, and that hadn't helped any. "He can't kill me," he'd said then, as he stared down Gaara confidently. "I have a real monster inside me. I won't lose to him." Then Gaara had gone and told them the story of his life and why he was the way that he was. It was a real horror story, involving assassination attempts, wanton murder, and a sand demon named Shikaku. Gai-sensei had appeared shortly afterwards, causing Gaara to slink away, and that had been the end of that little nightmare. But Gaara's story had really seemed to make an impact on Naruto. The loud mouth had appeared doubly wary and fearful of the foreign redhead after that. What exactly did he mean by that? Shikamaru wondered. The man from the bookstore called him a monster, so is that the secret? And Naruto knows. This is so troublesome. Naruto sat on the living room couch and sulked. He wasn't allowed to train for 3 whole days. He didn't see why. He felt fine. But his dad seemed to be rather firm on that time frame. When he'd woken up, there was a note telling him to take it easy for 3 days and a tracking seal painted on his right wrist. Naruto was sure that if he tried to sneak off to the training grounds, the seal would go off and he'd get in trouble. "Tagging me while I was asleep, very sneaky, Dad?" Naruto scowled at the black markings inked on the inside of his wrist. "Too bad I can't just wash it off." So far he'd tried to entertain himself with reading manga and playing video games. However, he'd read all his manga and hadn't bought any new volumes in a while, and he'd never been good at video games as he had little times to practice. Being a ninja was more important than keeping up with the latest manga or getting the high score in some game. "What am I supposed to do?" Naruto groaned. He glared down at the seal on his wrist. "If only I could get this off my arm." His father was a master of seals. There had to be some books on seals somewhere in the house. If he could find those books, then maybe he could find a way to remove the seal himself. The door chime interrupted his chain of thought. No one rang the doorbell. No one ever bothered the Hokage at his private residence. So who was at the door? Wary but very curious, Naruto scampered over to the door and cracked it open a few inches. On the other side he found Shikamaru and Ino. For a minute, Naruto got excited. "Shikamaru! Are you putting together another team?" "No." Shikamaru squinted at him. "Are you cleared for active duty yet?" Naruto pouted. "Well, no." His pout shifted into a confused frown. "If you're not here for a mission, then why are you here? And what about you, Ino?" "Huh?" The blonde girl blinked. "You say something?" "I came here to see if I could teach you some shogi," Shikamaru answered. "Ino spotted me on the street and decided to follow me." "Oh. You live here, Naruto?" Ino asked, wide-eyed. Yeah?" Naruto scratched at the back of his head. "Wow." Her pale blue eyes lit up. "You must be rich." "Not really." Naruto edged out of the door and shut it behind him. "I never got much allowance, and now that I'm a ninja I don't get any." Ino rolled her eyes. "I didn't mean just you, I meant your family. I mean, look at this house. It's huge. And to live in this neighborhood," she squinted at him. "With the way that you dress in that nasty orange outfit all the time, I thought that you were poor." "Hey, don't diss the orange." Naruto scowled. "Why shouldn't I?" Ino sniffed. "That outfit is ugly, it practically glows in the dark." "It's not suitable for the shinobi lifestyle," Shikamaru sighed wearily. "Wearing that much orange makes you a target." "Shikamaru!" Naruto wailed. "Not you too!" "You don't have to give up the color completely," Shikamaru muttered. "But it would make you a better shinobi if you wore less of it, a lot less of it." Naruto glowered at the both of them. "Don't diss the orange." "How can your mother let you outside in those clothes?" Ino snorted. The spiky-haired blonde stared at her blankly for a minute. "My mom's dead, Ino." "Oh." Ino squirmed awkwardly. "I am sorry. I didn't know." And Naruto shrugged, unsure of what to say in reply. Sure, he missed having a mom. It would really be nice if she hadn't died. He was sure that his dad would be a lot happier if she was still around. But he'd never known her, so her loss, her complete absence in his life, had never been personal. Not like how it was for his dad. Well, what about your dad?" Ino demanded, seemingly determined to assault his wardrobe. I know that men are generally less fashion conscious than women, but surely even he knows better than to let you run around in that orange abomination. Hey! I like my clothes! Naruto shouted, thoroughly offended. I'm sure my dad something once or twice, but I don't remember. He screwed his face up in a scowl. My clothes are fine. Oh? Naruto jumped and turned to find his dad standing not 2 feet away, leaning against the house, and looking rather amused. Ino squeaked in surprise and even Shikamaru jerked a little at the sudden arrival. But then again, he was the Hokage, the best ninja in the whole village. He could be more than sneaky enough to surprise a Chunin and a pair of genin. How long have you been standing there, Gigi? Not long, his dad replied, eyes glittering with thinly veiled amusement. You know, seeing as you can't train, now would be a good time to replenish your supplies and replace ruined clothing. You know, your jacket doesn't look so good. I don't want to go shopping, Naruto wailed, flailing his arms. His dad merely arched an eyebrow at him. I hate shopping for clothes, the boy sulked. Perhaps if you ask her nicely, Ino will help you, his father cheerfully suggested. I'd be happy to help Naruto, Hokage-sama. Ino chirped happily. Naruto shivered at the almost predatory look in Ino's eyes. That's okay, Ino, I'll get Sakura-chan to help me. Please! Ino snorted. Forehead girls practically moved into the library the past few days. She's too busy studying to help you. I, on the other hand, am free to assist you. The Yamanaka girl snagged his arm and started to pull him off his porch. Come on, Naruto, let's hit the stores. But I don't have my sandals on, Naruto protested desperately. And I don't have my wallet. His traitorous father handed him his Zora sandals and pressed a wad of bills into his hand. You can pay me back later. Have fun now. Gigi! Naruto screeched as Ino gleefully dragged him along while he stumblingly tried to yank on his sandals and escape at the same time. Save me! The Hokage simply waved at him as he was dragged away. Shikamaru? Naruto pleaded, looking to his Chunin classmate for possible salvation. Said Chunin simply shook his head and didn't interfere, but he did follow along. Man! Naruto sighed. Today just plain sucks. A little over a half an hour later, Naruto found himself trapped in one of the clothing stores that specialized in ninja apparel with Ino crafting outfit after outfit for him, and Shikamaru watching his agony with a bored expression on his lazy face. Normally Naruto would never have been in this store. The owner hated him and had chased him out several times in the past. But because Ino and Shikamaru were him, future heirs of important ninja clans and respected patrons, he'd been let in. But the shopkeeper kept one angry eye on him at all times. He supposed that the clothes that Ino was picking out were okay, but he didn't like them. Firstly, she dissed the color orange, so he was suspicious of anything she suggested to him. And secondly, there was no orange at all in her suggestions. Shikamaru had said he could have a little orange in his clothes, so he was going to have orange in his clothes. You have no taste at all, Ino hissed as she stormed off to try and find some clothes that he'd accept. Idiot! Do you think she'll give up soon? Naruto whispered to Shikamaru hopefully. Has she ever given up her silly competition with Sakura over Sasuke? Shikamaru sighed tiredly. Naruto groaned. I'm doomed. Just pick something so you can get out of here, Shikamaru suggested. I don't want to waste my money on clothes that I'm not going to wear, Naruto protested. It's the Hokage's money, Shikamaru pointed out. I still have to pay him back, Naruto huffed. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. You said it, Naruto scowled. And then Naruto-kun? The whisker-marked boy turned to find Hinata peeking around a rack of coats at him. Apparently she was shopping, too. There were a couple of dull tan, water-resistant, hooded cloaks draped over her arms. She was so surprised to see him that she was actually looking him in the eye, not staring at some point on the ground near his feet. Hi Hinata! Naruto grinned. Hey! He leaned in, excited. You think you can help sneak me out of here without Ino seeing? Aino-san? Hinata blinked her pale violet eyes in puzzlement. Hey, Hinata! Ino cheered, materializing at the Hyuga girl's shoulder. Help me out here, I'm trying to get this idiot to dress sensibly. WWA. What's wrong with the color orange? Naruto seethed loudly. It's the opposite of good camouflage, Ino screeched. Ninjas wear dark colors, neutral colors, green or brown or gray or camouflage patterned. Ninjas don't wear bright orange. I do, Naruto declared proudly. And I'm a ninja. Really? Ino drawled sarcastically. Naruto puffed himself up and shot Ino a nasty glare. Hey! You Hinata trailed off nervously before dumping her armload of ninja cloaks near Shikamaru and scampering off into the racks of clothing. Still scowling at Ino, Naruto rested his shoulder against a nearby wall and waited to see what Hinata would suggest. He was a little bit hopeful. Hinata wasn't like the other girls he knew. Perhaps she'd come up with something cool to wear. Some minutes later she shuffled up to him and offered up her choices, her eyes fixed timidly on the floor. She'd selected a pair of khaki pants with darker patches of extra fabric on the knees and cargo pockets to store extra things like smoke bombs or flash grenades or whatever, a black coat with dull red flame patterns trimming the bottom, almost like on his dad's Hokage jacket, and the fat red spiral common on shinobi uniforms in the Land of Fire, a plain t-shirt, and a pair of black fingerless gloves with metal plates on the backs. But what really caught his eye was the t-shirt. It was plain, but it was orange. Not the bright orange of his current outfit, it was more like the dull orange of autumn leaves. It wasn't what he preferred, but it was an acceptable shade. Seeing that shirt was a major plus for the whole outfit, and it impressed him enough for him to actually go and try it on. This really isn't that bad, he mused as he eyed his reflection in the changing room mirror. I like it. Grinning broadly, he dashed out and displayed himself for Ino's inspection. That'll work, Ino declared after circling him a few times. Now you really look like a ninja. I already looked like a ninja. Naruto pouted, before flashing Hinata a smile. Thanks a lot, Hinata. The girl immediately ducked her head and fiddled nervously with her fingers and mumbled something too quiet for him to make out. Shortly after that, Naruto had picked up a second coat, a few more pairs of pants, another pair of fingerless gloves, and several more of the orange t-shirts, and carried his purchases to the front counter. He wasn't the best at math, so he'd had Shikamaru double-check for him to make sure that his dad had given him enough money. But as the sour-faced shopkeeper rang up the price, Naruto's secret fear was realized. He'd been overcharged again. The price on the register was easily double what he should have been charged. The gray-haired man behind the counter smirked victoriously at Naruto's visible dismay. Sir, you seem to have entered the wrong prices, Shikamaru observed. Those items were mismarked, the shopkeeper replied almost smugly. What? Ino exploded. All those J jackets, and S shirts, and pants, and G gloves are mismarked? Hinata frowned, clearly baffled. How could that happen? My nephew is inept at restocking the racks, the owner answered calmly. Now boy, why don't you put some of that back and make sure that next time you can afford what you want to buy? Perhaps Iroh's shop down the street would better serve you, his goods are much cheaper. Naruto felt everything sink and he wearily started to sort through the pile of clothes to see what to put back on the racks, and took some relief in that he'd actually get to buy some of it. Troublesome, Shikamaru growled. If the prices are going to be so unreliable, I don't think I can shop here anymore. I should probably warn my family, too. What a drag. I've shopped here for years and never had such problems. Ino almost shouted. What terrible service. No way all those items were mispriced. I'm not shopping here ever again, and I'm telling everyone I know about this. Hinata, who had been next in line to buy those cloaks, shuffled nervously for a bit, then spoke up in the brief silence that followed Ino's threat. I should put these back. The price might be wrong, and I didn't bring much extra money with me. I'll just find another store. She started off to replace the merchandise. And I should warn my clan about this PP problem too. Naruto gaped at them all. What were they doing? Didn't they know that this was what always happened? Of course they didn't know. He was overcharged because of the QB, and they didn't know about that. If they knew, they wouldn't stick up for him this way. Wait. The shopkeeper snapped. Wait, I'll honor whatever price is on the tags today, and I'll straighten out my idiot nephew to prevent this from happening in the future. I'm terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. You'd better be sorry, Ino growled under her breath as Hinata returned to her place in line. How troublesome, Shikamaru groused. Naruto just mutely handed over the proper sum of money, too stunned to have anything to say. What a jerk! Ino seethed as they stepped out of the shop, Hinata scrambling after them with her own shopping bag in tow. I've never seen that man so rude. Did you pull a prank on that man while you were in the academy or something? No, Naruto shrugged. Not that I remember. He must have heard about me from someone else. Humph. Ino sniffed. I'm still telling everybody about what happened in there. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. You don't have to. Oh, but I do, Ino cackled. It's great gossip. Of course, Shikamaru sighed. Heh. Naruto glanced over at Hinata and smiled cheerfully. Hey Hinata, thanks again for helping me with the shopping. You picked out some awesome stuff for me. Why you're welcome. She squeaked and darted off in another direction, presumably towards home. Bye. Bye. He waved and almost lost his grip on his bags. Well, now that you have the attire of a proper ninja, I need to get back to my family's shop, Ino announced. See you later, Naruto. I should get home, too, Shikamaru grumbled. I have some chores I need to get to. Bye, guys. Naruto waved again, and did drop a bag this time. Once they were out of sight, he gathered up his new clothes and started slogging for home. That actually turned out okay, Naruto reflected. Good thing Hinata showed up and found me some good clothes. She respects the orange. Shikamaru frowned in thought as he walked along the fences in the Nara clan's patch of forest where they raised their deer and checked for damage. Ino's appearance had thwarted his plans to get Naruto alone and talk about what he'd said to Gaara in the hospital months ago. But he'd still managed to glean some interesting information nonetheless. I'm almost certain that the Hokage is Naruto's father, or at the very least his legal guardian. I don't see why else he'd show up on Naruto's porch around noon unless it was his house too and he was stopping by for some lunch. And the way that he trapped Naruto into Ino's shopping trip and gave him his shoes and lent him money, that whole interaction is one that could be expected of a father and son. His frown deepened as his mind shifted to his other line of thought concerning Naruto. Bad-mouthing him is one thing, but that shop owner deliberately overcharged him. He didn't even want to let him in the store. If Ino and I weren't with him, he might not have gotten in. And the way Naruto reacted, no loud protesting, just resignation, like he expected it to happen. This sort of treatment has happened to him before. He paused and tested a fence post. I'm going to need some help with this. Shikamaru sighed in annoyance. Just as he'd been getting into his informal investigation, he'd pulled another mission. Thankfully, he wasn't the captain this time. Honestly, he wasn't ready to lead again so soon after his previous command, but he was stuck working with other, older Chunin that he didn't know. The mission seemed fairly simple and probably wouldn't take more than a few days, but it would still be a real drag. Looks like I'll have to wait until I get back to start spreading my net. The Nara sighed and struck out to the village gates where he'd rendezvous with the rest of his team. Troublesome. Naruto held up the torn and stained remains of his old jacket and shivered. The hole in the shoulder, front and back, was clearly defined, revealing the path that Sasuke's lightning-shrouded fist had taken. He didn't like looking at it at all. Gritting his teeth, he removed the clan symbol from the shoulder before shoving the bright orange and blue coat into the garbage can. Then he picked up one of his two new coats, a heavy needle and thread, and got to sewing. He was really bad at it, but all the stitches would be on the inside, and he needed his clan patch on his new coat. It had been his mother's. When he'd first enrolled in the academy at age 6, his dad had given it to him for his birthday. If he thought hard enough, he could still remember his father handing him the small flat box that contained the patch of the Uzumaki clan. The pristine white spiral mounted on a thick leather backing that had a white cord and wooden white and red whistle hanging from it had puzzled him. But when his father had informed him that it represented the name Uzumaki, and had belonged to his mother, it became really cool. And when he'd first found his signature orange jacket, he tacked it on the shoulder, and that had been that. Once he was satisfied that it was properly attached, he cheerfully yanked his new coat on over his new awesome t-shirt, rolled up the sleeves a bit, and admired himself in the mirror in his dad's bedroom. He had his new pants on, too, and his new fingerless gloves were tucked in a jacket pocket. Naruto turned around a few times, did a few poses, and grinned hugely. I rock. He laughed loudly, pumping fist. The young ninja was about to run off and finish putting on his gear, but then he remembered that he still wasn't allowed to train. There were still 2 full days to survive before he got to do anything. That managed to deflate his good mood for about 5 minutes. What to do, he muttered to himself as he wandered through his large, empty house. I've already paid Gigi back. He'd left the money that his father had lent him the previous day on his nightstand for the Hokage to find in the morning. I got new sandals to go with my new clothes. Before dinner the previous day he'd swung by the shoe store and picked up black Zora sandals as his old ones had been feeling tight, and their bright blue color didn't fit with his new ninja wardrobe. I could pick up some new manga. Groceries, he said suddenly, pounding a fist into his other palm. The fridge and pantry are almost empty, and we're almost out of cup ramen. Darting down to the kitchen, he hopped up onto the counter to grope around on top of the refrigerator for an envelope. His dad rarely got around to grocery shopping, especially now that Naruto was old enough to do it himself, but he always left money for his son to use. However, sometimes he forgot to refill the envelope with Rio. Empty. Naruto sulked. Damn it. His sulk lasted only a few minutes, though. I guess I'll just have to go to the office. Racing to the front door, he barely paused to yank his new sandals on, then sprinted out the door in the direction of the Hokage Tower. He bounded over rooftops even though he really wasn't supposed to. He wasn't wearing any of his ninja gear or his hideate, so he wasn't on duty, and as he wasn't on duty he really shouldn't be traveling by roof. But he loved getting around that way and he had energy to burn. Whooping like a maniac, Naruto dropped from the last rooftop and lunged through the front doors of the tower, and stopped short when someone snagged the back of his new coat. Just where do you think you're going? Naruto looked up, blinked a few times, and scowled when he recognized the mask of the ANBU who'd halted his flight. Yamato, let go of my coat. I need to go get grocery money from Gigi. Naruto? The porcelain cat mask tilted quizzically, and then the ANBU released him. Nice coat. Thanks. Naruto grinned, indignation forgotten. He carefully smoothed out his new jacket, and turning so that one of his favorite ANBU minders could get a better look at it. Hinata picked it out for me. Cool, huh? The coat of a future Hokage, Yamato agreed gravely. Hyuga Hinata helped you? Yeah, Naruto beamed. I need to let Kakashi-senpai know about this, Yamato muttered to himself thoughtfully. Naruto squinted. Huh? Hokage-sama is just about done handing out the day's missions, Yamato informed him. So long as you don't interrupt a briefing, you should be able to get your grocery money. Great. Naruto waved and scampered deeper into the tower. See ya, Yamato. The Hokage Tower was almost like a second home to Naruto. When he'd been small, his dad would take him to the office all the time. There were even a few pictures laying around somewhere of him as a toddler sitting in his dad's lap and helping him rubber stamp the Hokage seal on various documents. He knew the ins and outs of the tower complex far better than any kid his age, and many adults, too. He'd even found ways into some of the restricted zones when he'd gotten bored enough. Weaving around other shinobi and speeding down hallways, he paused only when he reached his father's office door. There he waited and listened to see if anyone was in there with him. When he heard nothing, he cracked open the door, saw his father was indeed alone, and then slipped inside. His dad sat in his swivel chair and stared pensively out his half-circle of office windows. Naruto almost wondered if he should bother him or not. But the house was rather bare of food, and money was required to get more food, and to get money the Hokage had to be bothered. Hokage Gigi. The Hokage turned his chair back around, opened his mouth to say something, and then did a double take. So, you actually bought some new clothes. When I saw all that money left on my nightstand I thought that you hadn't picked out anything. I was paying you back, Naruto replied. You told me to. Yes, I did say that, didn't I? His dad eyed him up and down. Very nice. Young Ino has good taste. Naruto made a face. Ino didn't pick this out, Hinata did. Oh? He raised an eyebrow. Did you thank her? Of course. Naruto huffed. She picked out some awesome stuff. The boy pulled out the fingerless gloves from his pockets and yanked them on. I've even got gloves now. Very nice, he nodded in approval. Did you come by to show off your new clothes? No, Naruto frowned as he recalled the purpose of his visit. He reached into his other pocket and retrieved the empty money envelope. There's no grocery money. Oh? His father dug out his wallet and started counting out some Rio notes. That money never seems to last as long as I think it will. He hesitated before handing the cash over. Are you sure you're not using some of that to buy yourself candy? No, Naruto protested, biting his tongue on the real reason. They always overcharge me on everything but cup ramen. The only way to stop the overcharging was if his dad, or some other important adult, went with him. His dad was a busy man, and it was silly and impractical for him to always come along on shopping trips to intimidate shop owners. Naruto was a real ninja now, technically an adult, and he would find ways to handle it himself, even if he had to make up the difference in the overcharging with his own hard-won mission pay. All right, and the money changed hands. Why don't you buy yourself some Pocky this time? Naruto shrugged cheerfully and waved as he darted out of the office. See ya later, Gigi. No way I can get Pocky. It's candy and they'll probably charge me 10 times what it's really worth. Naruto had swung by his room to pick up his own wallet before hitting the grocery store. The money his dad set aside for groceries was never enough to cover the inflated prices he had to pay, so he always had to sacrifice some of his hard-earned cash. Hopefully it wouldn't be too bad this time, as he'd spent a good chunk of his personal funds on his new clothes. The grocery store he frequented was one of the largest in the village, so it boasted multiple cashiers and gave him a chance to pick one that might not hate him as much or raise the prices too high. There was also a greater selection to pick from, especially the clearance items where he usually shopped. And of course there were several different flavors of dirt cheap cup ramen on hand. He crept into the store, careful not to draw attention to himself, and snagged a plastic basket to fill with goods. Following his usual procedures, he picked up the most expensive items first: bread, milk, and eggs. There was no way he'd pick up those things on clearance. He didn't want to make his dad sick with food poisoning, and he didn't enjoy suffering the runs himself. After that he went for whatever was canned or dry on clearance. And finally he loaded up on ramen cups. And then it was off to play cashier roulette. He studied each open checkout lane, seeking a very young cashier or one who looked foreign. If he got lucky he wouldn't get overcharged a cent. But today was not his lucky day. All the store employees were older and clearly long-time residents of the village. Naruto sighed and settled for the lane with the shortest line. As he placed his groceries on the conveyor, his heart sank further and further. His wallet was going to be hurting after this. He'd have to beg his dad for a slew of D-ranks to replenish his stash of Rio. When the final price was rung up on the register, he was startled. It was too low. He blinked in confusion and stared at the old lady at the register, speechless. "Hurry up and pay so I can get to the next customer," the crusty woman demanded. Sorry," he stammered and fumbled to obey. "And wash that marker off your face, boy," she grunted. "People might mistake you for that orange-coated delinquent." Naruto froze for a moment. "What?" "Yes, ma'am, sorry, ma'am." "Humph." She sniffed, took his money, handed him his change and receipt, and waved him off with a warning look. He almost ran out of the store, just in case the old bat realized her mistake. But the jug of milk was a little heavy and awkward to carry, and the eggs were breakable, so he didn't run. He quickly, but carefully, walked outside and headed towards home. "What the hell? She thought I wasn't me? Why?" He frowned. "My clothes. I'm not wearing my usual orange, so she thought that my whisker marks were black marker." Before he'd known about his connection to the fox and the source of his facial markings, he never realized what had highlighted him to all the hating villagers or thought much about the whiskers, period. He'd always had the marks on his cheeks and few people ever specifically mentioned them for any reason. It had never occurred to him to try and cover them up or disguise them in any way. "I could use a henge to hide them, just change my face a little. But that would be hard to hold for long periods. If I get distracted it could fall and then I'd get in real trouble. I'll have to think about this," he muttered and rubbed at his cheek before shifting his grip on his groceries and continuing on his trek home. Minato sat straight and still at the elevated head of the long, half-circle table in the village council audience chamber. At his right hand sat Mitokado Hamura, an old, bespectacled man who had once been a good friend and advisor to the Sandaime Hokage. At his left had sat Yudetane Koharu, an old woman who had much the same credentials as Hamura. With Danzu, who sat beside Hamura, they formed the senior members of the village council and top advisors of the Hokage. They were wise and experienced and commanded a great deal of respect. Unfortunately, they were also old and increasingly inflexible and pessimistic. They frowned on Minato's youth, Danzu more openly than the other two, and were skeptical of many of his decisions. And they formed Naruto's most powerful and stubborn enemies. They held very little faith that Naruto had the demon under control and would keep it under control. Danzu wanted Naruto for a weapon. Hamura and Koharu were more of the opinion that he should have simply been killed. But for all his power and prestige as Hokage, he couldn't get rid of any of them. Unless they voluntarily stepped down or died, he was stuck with them. Minato's only consolation was that they were the only elders on the council. The elder members that had once represented the other major ninja clans had either stepped down or died, handing their power on to their heirs. Filling the remaining seats of the half-circle were the rest of the clan representatives of the village council. Tsunade of the Sannin now filled the seat of the Senju clan, and although she was the next oldest member after the elders, she was far less hidebound than they were, and she was an ally of Naruto's, not an enemy. The rest of the representatives, Shikaku, Nara clan, Inoichi, Yamanaka clan, Chusa, Akimichi clan, Tsum and Kuramaru, Inazuka clan, Shibi, Aburame clan, and Hayashi, Hyuga clan, were of Minato's generation and were generally supportive of what he tried to do. Normally this group of people met only once a month, and even then it was rare that they were all present at the same time. But it wasn't the designated monthly meeting, and all were there. This meant only one thing: Uchiha Sasuke was being sentenced. The sentencing of an attempted deserter and village traitor generally didn't call for a meeting of the village elite. Under normal circumstances, the delinquent ninja faced the review board and the Hokage, or a personally chosen substitute. The punishment was determined and carried out, and that was that. But Sasuke, as the sole survivor of a clan that had possessed the precious Kekkai Genkai, was getting special treatment again. The Uchiha clan had held a special place in the collective heart of Konoha. They had headed and primarily made up the military police, the basic security force of the village. While most other ninja tended to find the Uchiha arrogant, the civilians loved them, saw them as protectors. When they were massacred, the village suddenly seemed less safe and the village mourned them. And Sasuke, as the sole survivor, and an adorable child, who had seen the carnage and was now an orphan, was incredibly sympathetic. The village embraced him and loved him. They reduced prices for him, even gave him things for free, and sang his praises. In their eyes, the boy could do no wrong, because he was Uchiha and the hope for reviving the great clan. It didn't matter to them that Sasuke largely rejected or sneered at them and held himself aloof from everyone. They simply wrote his behavior off as that of a troubled boy who had been so traumatically orphaned. He could easily be forgiven for that, and just about anything else questionable that he did. If anything severe was done to Sasuke in punishment for his current transgressions, a large portion of the village would be up in arms. It was further complicated by Naruto's involvement in the retrieval mission. There would be little sympathy for the Bakemono's injuries. But Sasuke had to be punished somehow, and the civilians weren't the only complicating factor. As the only hope for reviving the Uchiha clan, and its powerful Kekkai Genkai, Sasuke was a special case in the minds of most ninja. The ninja clans, too, were highly sympathetic to the boy's traumatic history. And they were willing to overlook certain things in order to keep Sasuke loyal, happy, or as happy as he could be, and get him ready to make new little Uchihas when he was old enough. But at least several of the clans had reason to be very angry with Sasuke. The selfish, power-hungry Uchiha had hurt their children. Shikamaru and Chuji were heirs. Never mind that it was only indirectly that Sasuke had hurt them, he was still ultimately responsible. Still, it had been a headache-inducing balancing act in determining Sasuke's punishment. Minato alone had decided it. But he had to make sure that it was acceptable to the other clans so that they wouldn't force the Hokage to reconsider his sentence. It had taken endless small meetings and hours to decide, but decide he had. The double doors at the far end of the room groaned open and a pair of animal-masked ANBU entered, dragging a chained Uchiha Sasuke between them. The pale, sullen boy was no longer blindfolded as his eyes were now sealed. He appeared mostly recovered from his fights and his arrogant attitude that Minato had encountered earlier was even worse now. The boy was expressionless, and his dark eyes stared straight ahead, giving no sign of acknowledging anyone in the room. Minato sat on the rising urge to hit the boy. The two ANBU positioned Sasuke before the village council, carefully attached the boy's chains to heavy rings in the floor, and stepped back into the shadows of the room, ready to react if their prisoner decided to try anything stupid. Minato sat back in his chair and stared down his son's teammate. Sasuke continued mutely broadcasting his defiance and contempt of the proceedings by giving no sign of acknowledgement or respect for the room's occupants. Finally the silence was broken. Uchiha Sasuke, before your sentence is declared, have you anything to say? Minato asked, not expecting any reply. There was none. Fine. Minato cleared his throat a tad theatrically and got down to business. Uchiha Sasuke, for your crimes of deserting the village with intent to ally with a sworn enemy of Konohagakure no Sato and an S-class criminal, the injury of Naruto Shikamaru, Inuzuka Kiba and Akamaru, the severe injury of Akimichi Chuji and Hyuga Niji,